At the last minute, we're having
Oh, yeah, they're. Especially.
So that's Jennifer, but it also could be John. It's Jennifer, is
Olson.
Form 5, Olson, that's her architecture firm, but I need her to message me and tell.
Can you text him? It's on the website.
I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm,
You need me to- Sorry, I just really need to try and make a phone. If I can. Except I bet I can hear. That's
Were there a lot of cars up there, Barbara? Were there a lot of cars at, uh-huh. Yeah.
okay,
How are we doing online?
great.
Oh, cool.
We have,
Jennifer. Nice.
yeah, so she's, yeah,
Can everybody hear us okay? We can
I
probably
think so.
not,
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. Christie in the desert.
I'm just gonna mark this virtual.
I've lost everybody.
We can hear you, Bill.
Can you hear me still?
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody, and great to see everybody, and I feel like I missed you for the last couple of weeks, I haven't seen that, so. I don't know if you can see, but it's all you, and, it's great to be here to take one last look at this report. Hopefully you've all had a chance to take a look at it, everybody has a copy, it's great, and I just want to thank you all, I want to thank everyone in this room and online that has participated in this effort that we've been embarking on, and we have done 10 months ago, and we're hopefully going to culminate tonight. And then take this packet to the county commissioners, Michael will be doing that June 6th. The planning and zoning committee and some county commissions. I'll be out of town, otherwise I'd be there. Anyway, so yeah, thank you everybody, and thank you for all of the hard work and the thoughtfulness and the compromising and just really the work that's been done to get to where we are this afternoon.
And as we look through this, hopefully most of it looks pretty familiar in many ways. So we want to start by emphasizing now that this is the work that we've done. It is not a new thing that we did over the last month. So you should recognize charts, you should recognize language. It's been logically stitched together in a way that makes the case for what is really our body of work, the table of recommendations. Just a couple things. So sections 1 through 7 are kind of, that's what we did, and then chapter 8, the table of recommendations, that's how body of work. We have done a lot of fine tuning of this already, so any significant material change that's proposed tonight should be taken very seriously, and it should be considered that this is a very late stage to be proposing a significant material change to this document. We voted 26-0 the last time we met on the table of recommendations, and the changes that have been made to them, with the exception of affordable housing, reflect our work up to now, the agreements we've made up to now. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind as we talk about this. And with that, I will hand it to Lawrence.
Well, and thanks all, welcome back. And as Mona and Michael said, I just want to take a moment to recognize the massive amount of work that you all have put in to the report that's in front of you tonight. In putting this together, I think staff can say with confidence that the work that you all have done is impressive. We have done our best to represent it here in this report, but I just wanted to take a moment to just acknowledge the substantial commitment that you all have made to this product. And hopefully you feel that it's well reflected in this document as well. So tonight, the real goal is to, first and foremost, as Michael said, look at the new addition of affordable housing and determine whether or not we want to adopt that into our table of recommendations. And then we turn our attention to the package as a whole. The document in front of you does have the draft affordable housing recommendations incorporated in it. In advance of getting this document, you also all got the updated table of recommendations that had those changes highlighted in purple, and we'll walk through what those are tonight too. So really quickly, I'm going to share my screen so folks online can all see what we're looking at. And so tonight, our agenda will really be, as I said, to review that recommendation table with the addition of affordable housing and the updates that we all decided upon at our last and very productive meeting. Then we're going to turn our attention to that committee report and the review and approval process for that. And then we'll look at next steps and what happens from here following this 10-month full masterclass in land use planning that we've all been going through together. So the purpose of the meeting, affordable housing recommendation, and then looking at the report as a whole, we're going to look at it in two parts, submitting any non-material suggestions, any clerical comments that you have, knowing this draft is hot off the presses. You all have not had much time to review it yet. There's going to be time for any wordsmithing clerical recommendations that you may have to submit those to staff, and in coordination with the co-chairs, we're going to incorporate those in. As Michael said, there's already some additional changes that are beginning to pop out to really make sure that section 8, that the table of recommendations, the meat of this product, your work, is appropriately teed up and reflected into it without making any material changes. As Michael said, if we are considering any material changes at this late stage, we should take them very seriously, and we've got a process to work through that, like we've worked through all of our changes. And there are things that must be introduced tonight. But again, we just want to take this very seriously. So when we turn our attention to the committee report as a whole, we'll be doing it in sort of the clerical and non-material function, and then looking at any material functions that we must address tonight. Michael, did I capture that fairly?
You did.
So the table of recommendations that you all have in front of you, what you all will remember, we added the additional TDR concept as a group, voted to include that recommendation as a pilot program, as we reviewed at our last meeting, and is incorporated in the final report. The square footage cap, that was a big part of our last discussion. Where we landed is 9250 in the UGB and 8750 everywhere else. That was the most consensus after 3 votes, and that was our sweet spot that we found. The overlay, again, that was one substantial discussion on that one, voted to include in the recommendation with the modifications to the special event, STR, and TDR landing zones. Also, affordable housing, that was a big action item coming out of our last meeting. We convened, it seems like forever ago, but we convened a work group on affordable housing on May 3rd, and those recommendations have been expanded into the report tonight. So that's what we'll be looking at first. And turning our attention to those affordable housings, this is the scoring we've been using in our outcomes table. When we break out affordable housing, you can see it is one of those things, and there's a reason for it. Calling a special meeting, there's a reason for it being a priority almost universally in this room, because it does have such a dramatic impact on all of our quality of life outcomes that we've been tracking today. And really, the pros are the potential for the county to add.
48.
Thank you, Meg.
Oh, I'm sorry, 49.
48 to 52. It's on our next slide, Tim. You're always ahead of me. And the big pro there is that there's potential to add and preserve the existing affordable housing stock while making infrastructure upgrades. There's also an opportunity to change that ratio of existing housing stock towards more affordable housing. And as a whole, we really couldn't come up with a con for increasing the amount of affordable housing available in our valley. And Tim, thanks for the preface to this. You turn to pages 48 to 52 in your report, you can see the full package of expanded recommendations on affordable housing. You're going to have to turn your report sideways as you get into the table. But pages 48 to 52 includes all of that. And you can see what's in there. It represents, actually in the, say, I think is it 49?
It's 49. Yeah, because the prologues went a little pushed us.
Cool.
Sorry.
No worries. So I'm just gonna really quickly highlight a couple of the recommendations in here. Special review criteria must include evaluation for housing. And so I'm gonna read down the recommendations in that second column from the left. Exploring more ways to expand the housing impact fees, especially in tiers 3 and 4. For example, adjusting the cash and lieu program to account for the actual cost of developing affordable housing and completing a housing master plan to identify where affordable and multifamily housing is appropriate and revise the code to allow for greater density and development. And before we turn the page, I do just want to call attention to the rationale. These 3 bullets, but primarily the first one, that the committee's work has largely focused on managing the types of development that are inconsistent with our community values. But the discussion we've been having on affordable housing, and one of the themes that came up in the work group, is that more affordable housing is the type of development we do want to see, and it should be incentivized. And that we should harness all of the tools at our disposal to advance that goal. So with going through the recommendations again, there's a lot of them here, so I'm just going to hit them quickly. Supporting partnerships, that was a key theme that came out. Completing a study to really understand the economy of the housing sector in our valley. That was a recommendation that came in. Reviewing and revising the land use code to ensure language is not prohibitive, to only be within the UGBs and create opportunities that allow for and incentivize creative housing solutions. So really opening up the playbook on where affordable housing will be allowed. And you can see all the sub bullets there to advance that goal. And allowing affordable housing beyond the UGBs, if you turn to page 51, this was a big takeaway from the affordable housing work group discussion. Allowing 2, 3, 4 unit multifamily housing in rural county under the right context and the right zoning with hazard mitigation and sufficient access to infrastructure. And all of those bullets under that really get at what some of those specifics would be for allowing more affordable housing beyond the UGBs. Turning to the next page, 52. Preservation of the existing stock. So looking at the community buy down program for mobile home parks, the individual units, the free market shared equity program, and redevelopment and expansion of the existing development, which was addressed previously. Looking at affordable housing certificates was another one. And integrating an affordable housing credit system into the tiered system on page 53, and then funding and incentives. One of the things we discussed as a group was that funding is one of the greatest barriers to building more housing. So how do we incentivize and explore all the diverse mechanisms and tools we have at our disposal to fund affordable housing? And then there are several examples listed in the report at the bottom of page 53. And I believe that concludes the high level recommendations that expanded on what was already in this document. So I know that was a big one, and want to open it up for discussion. Anybody who was at that work group, if there's things that I missed here in the key takeaways. Michael, I don't know if you have anything to add from that discussion.
No, I think this captures what we talked about. I'm gonna, Morgan was on the call, there were several of them on the call for that meeting, but I think this is, I think we've done a great job of there's some important points here, and I think one of the biggest ones is to allow affordable housing development the UGB lets. The new aha, this seems pretty easy to do.
And maybe the first question could be to those of you who were part of the group who helped create this, just to let us know. It feels like it's all there. It was actually well, and then we can talk about it.
I guess for me, experience, with master plans, in broad general, vision statements that don't get necessarily codified and then or they're misunderstood later when they're trying to apply them. But I think the connection between housing and occupying. Policy and things on the code, with the pretty strong connection to the world, just different. That's the key to the case, people come up with master plans for redevelopment something, and neighborhood, and then politically, when change direction, and the only different is, so it's not in my opinion. So if we're really serious about master plans, we have strong eye to this. With the policies and the codes and all the other things, end up supporting. Strengthening.
Yeah, in some ways that sort of broad statement there, that will, I think we must be trying to identify where it should go. Is sort of not contradicted, but like some of the subsequent bullets actually say, like, allow affordable housing beyond DPD, that actually goes so far as to say where it should be allowed, right? And so I think, this is an aggregation of things that were recommended, and that master plan was an earlier point that was made that we should do something with that. But then the points were made emphatically subsequently that that's not enough. We need to push harder than that. I think that the subsequent bullets do that. So I agree with you that like Asbury community plan is an example, right? Create an aspirational document that is not going anywhere. But I think there are a lot of bullets in here that go pretty specific. Like I think that like one of the lot that it's a really significant 2, 3, 4 unit multifamily housing in rural county under the right context of zoning, etc. Basically says that the county should be open as a place to live for the people who are making their life within this economy. Because increasingly that was not what was happening, right? Like that, those were the areas in our community that were increasingly off limits to the people who were making their living. So I think it's.
I just bring it up because I think that strengthening and making sure that thing is. Whatever the policy come out of the discussion.
And let's go.
I just, for that, you all here today, I just want to say, I really appreciate the directive, here and I really support it. We made one request for an investment, which is good things to the CBD section. The bullet says apply at 501,000 square foot area bonus with caretaker development unit. And I would just suggest that we have the restricted caretaker development unit, because the guideline in which it can be used, however. But really support the options.
That's good.
Super important.
I was gonna say the same thing. This is a great model for how we're gonna address any issues tonight. So I think that's a great proposal. Does the big group want to second that motion? Anyone here?
I think Randy addressed that. And saying that would put a kibosh on any kind of real estate transfer, putting a deed restriction. I know I'm asking that's the case, people just don't want to deal with that.
I just want to give a clarification on that what Randy was talking to is we said deed restricted to a public entity. This is just putting a deed, what Jessica is proposing is just deed restricting the property, not over to a public entity. So that's the divergent of what Randy was arguing versus what Jessica is proposing.
There are multiple fixes, see that's going to have a deed restriction. Owners are able to rent them, they have to do it to qualify and this sort of property and the AU is part of payment.
This is the way to incentivize like housing your employees on site, right?
This is, I was forwarded a proposal by community members this morning, and really have not had full time to digest it. But we have, staff has printed it out. We can pass, can you pass it out now?
We can.
You want to finish the vote?
It by email, but it's in regard to a,
a program that is for creating CDUs for existing homeowners to more readily create CDUs for workforce housing and community contributors. And she, the member of the public, I think she believed she specifically said no to the restrictions in her proposal. But it's interesting and worth reading. Kara has some highlights of how this might be incorporated into the report.
Well, Jessica, I love the second, motion. And just to clarify that, from my understanding, this was, basically a free PDR, if you look at it that way. The person getting a bonus for, applying a deed restriction to a CMD. So it's, I think what Randy was talking about is that, applying that to a CDU that doesn't give you benefit while the property owner do that, but this, they're the tremendous benefit, especially if you have to buy, for TDRs to get either that loan, tremendous benefit that he's having on either of the garage.
And I think there was a motion on the table and it was seconded, so I think we should take a vote on whether or not to take up this issue on adding the restriction to on page 50, the third bullet of the third bullet that would read apply a 500 to 1,000 square foot floor area bonus with a, and then amendment comes now, a deed restricted addition here, and then it would continue to read caretaker dwelling unit. So that's a motion that's been seconded. Let's take a vote. Who is in favor of adding this amendment?
Online.
Thank you.
And please hold the hands
Yeah.
up.
Please hold, and if you're online, please hold them up.
And if you didn't follow what we're voting on, just say so, and we can repeat it.
Yeah, if you can't hear it, then.
Yeah, if you don't mind repeating it, I'm not totally clear on what the motion is.
Sierra, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Repeat the motion, Miles.
Sarah, do you want to type in the chat?
Same might be true for Bill. Can we check our audio levels?
Can you all hear me?
Do we have a count of everyone? Let's just make sure we have a count first. I'm Alex and Miles do.
And let's go. If we've got a count, let's go to the nays. Thanks, Brian. We've got you on here. Anyone opposed?
Sarah would like you guys to repeat the motion.
I just don't understand what, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. I
If
can.
if you don't mind repeating it, it's just kind of hard to hear online with the crosstalk.
Of course, no problem at all. Well, we're gonna repeat the motion and we're gonna address, there's an audio issue here in the room as well. So Sierra, can you hear me now? Can everybody online hear me now? Okay, perfect. So the motion is, it is on page 50. It is the third sub bullet to the third bullet that starts with reviewing and revise the land use code. So the proposed amendment that's been made a motion and has been seconded is the apply a 500 to 1,000 square foot floor area bonus with, and here comes the amendment, the amended text, a deed restricted to be inserted before caretaker dwelling unit. So the amended text would read in full, apply a 500 to 1,000 square foot floor area bonus with a deed restricted caretaker dwelling unit. Is everybody clear on the motion? Maybe let me ask it this way. Is anybody unclear on the motion? Hearing none, we will take a vote. All in favor of this proposed amendment? And online? Thank you. Any opposed? One online? I see none online. If anyone is opposed online, let me know. Going once, going twice, gone. Okay, we've got a vote with one opposed and I don't know what our total.
None votes, two not attending, Chris and Randy are the votes.
Okay.
We're not.
And we got Tim.
Yeah.
Did the non-attendees not give anyone their privacy?
Not on this specific
Not-
one. Yeah,
And I just want to circle back to Tim had alluded to, we wanted to finish up that motion, so there was we got it this afternoon, so I was able to do just a review. And there's probably a couple of comments that just, like the deed restriction, but it really is in, was addressing kind of a request for the growth committee to look at CDUs, and in the quick staff review, and we have a copy, we'll hand it out to all of you. Is that really a lot of what was being requested is actually encapsulated in all of your proposals, that, there is part of what's in the recommendations from all of you is reviewing and revising land use codes to ensure that CDUs are something that are more incentivized throughout all of Pickens County. That they are something that, again, is incentivized, that the land use code is updated to allow for it. And then also, I think an important piece that that you all have built into your recommendation is the affordable housing credit program, which, as you all have proposed, would potentially be a financial incentive for property owners to be able to build those CDUs as well. So just wanted to get that's the quick synopsis of what was shared late this afternoon, and we'll but we've got public comment for all of you as you consider your
and we can pass that out as a handout, or we can email it out to your preference.
I think it's more productive to email it out,
Okay.
but one point that this person made was that really the program would be based on voluntary participation within this, incentivizing community members to come forward and getting certain kinds of credits for creating workforce housing. So the reason I voted against the deed restriction was because of that, because this person laid out the voluntary participation rather than mandatory.
But do you see them as one canceling the other? I mean, how can this idea not exist alongside what we just approved?
Well, it can, but I'm just opposed in principle, I think, to the deed restriction. Prefer to see it on a voluntary basis.
I would say that we should use that deed restricted language anytime we talk about CD. So it's very clear, next to the 2 bullet points down or something, requiring the vision to about CDU. If they're deed restricted CDU, I think it's a huge area of abuse if they're not restricted.
And because I think it does bear really big extra, and I'll make a motion to do what you just said, which is to add the deed restriction to any applied employee. CDU.
We have a motion on the floor, it's been seconded, and the motion is for everyone online, is to add deed restriction anytime that a CDU is mentioned in the context of affordable housing. Is that?
Yes.
Okay, that is the motion. Is anyone unclear on the motion? Blake.
You got unmuted.
Sorry, can you repeat it? It just broke up when you were stating it on my computer.
No problem. The motion that has been seconded, that is on the floor, is that anytime that we're referring to a CDU in the context of affordable housing, we add the words deed restricted in front of it. Is anyone unclear on the motion? Blake, did that clarify?
It's taking Jessica's idea that we all just agreed to, say one person, and making sure it exists in all of this.
And I will point out the very next bullet is incentivize CDU through voluntary participation. For housing. No, but just for the full context of how it would fit in. So the motion on the floor that has been seconded is adding deed restricted, the text deed restricted. And Jessica?
As moved, I'm going to vote no on this because of the bullet you just shared, which is incentivize CD through voluntary participation, which is the opposite of requiring a deed restriction. So for that bullet, it wouldn't make sense to say deed restriction in my mind, and I think to points already made. Can you clarify then what you said, because it sounded like it's mandatory for deed restriction and then it's voluntary participation. Is that what you're saying? There's a conflict there? So, I'll just say what I think. CDUs should be allowed everywhere, right? That is my opinion. If you're gonna get more square footage, additional square footage is 500 to 1,000 square feet of floor area. That should be deed restricted. You shouldn't get that for free just because you decide to say it's a caretaker dwelling unit. And your, best friend is just gonna come stay and then you're gonna, do a secret short-term rental, whatever you wanna do, right? So to me, that's the one that needs to be deed restricted. Otherwise, if you want to use your own floor area that's allowed under the sliding scale and the tiers that we're suggesting, and you want to use some of that floor area for CDU, that's great, it's fine. But I don't think that that should be required to be.
That's spelled out in more specifically as you just did. If you're using your own allowed square footage, then it's not the same as you getting an additional.
Exactly.
It's a TDR.
To me, that's what that fourth bullet, the one right underneath the floor area bonus says, incentivize CDUs with voluntary participation, not requirement. That's what that is. So are you suggesting?
I think the confusion will be,
That is not required.
is there a CDU that's not deed restricted and it doesn't just warrant a new different term or a new definition?
Yeah.
Or we always have to preface a CDU as either being deed restricted or undeed restricted. And I don't think we need to get into code writing right now, but maybe it's more of a terminology definition on what. Per what Jessica said is a benefit to you from a floor area standpoint, therefore deed restricted. If not part of your floor area, otherwise it's a different type of loan.
Can I just make a suggestion without doing a vote or anything, is the clarification that I'm hearing is really just adding to the bullet that you all just voted on. Is that requiring a deed restriction to get the floor area loan, apply a floor area bonus with a caretaker dwelling unit that requires a deed restriction, and let the rest stand as it. Okay.
I would say, since I was the one that originally said all these restricted, I agree with Jessica, if you want to use your own square footage, that you should be able to use your own square footage, and then the city will allow you to put a second kitchen in, which is the way that it can be used. But I don't know other instances,
The other point in this is, I think that helps, HOAs potentially be encouraged to relax some of their restrictions, because what we covered in the meeting is the county can trump whatever the caucuses say. Some of the caucuses did not allow accessory dwelling units to use, but HOA rules can't be overruled by the county. So.
Yeah, so but the CDUs being deed restricted and this kind of worry that we have of developers going, oh, I don't want a deed restriction, and I'm not gonna go there. How can we incentivize developers or homeowners or whoever actually want to do that? What can we throw out there as a carrot to increase this instead of having it be just restrictions? Can we give them something that they might really want, which extra square footage, whatever.
So that's not bonus, like whatever they do, up to 1,000 square feet, potentially wouldn't count against their allowable square footage, so it's pure bonus.
Pure bonus, okay.
And so they could create a CDU and have somebody living in it. And it wouldn't count towards their square footage. And that's a bonus itself. I mean, really, it's not going to be, it would be deed restricted, protected, but.
I think that the needle we're trying to throw over here is, for Randy's point, and last time we discussed this, nobody's gonna build a CDU and let you tell them who should live there. Nobody's gonna do that.
Right.
I would without this kind of square footage. But we don't want the sort of the extreme other end, which is you build CDU and like whoever you feel like should live there, regardless of their qualification status as an employee, gets to live there. And this feels like it's the way to let someone essentially house one of their workers, because if they're truly a worker, they would meet the actual eligibility by hours worked in the county. So it seems like it's trying to find that sweet spot to incentivize something, like get by not counting the square footage of the unit against the overall square footage, but then making sure that it is housing someone who, through our push for more employee affordable housing, is actually doing it.
The other element I just call attention to is what you all recommended in the affordable housing credits, is that then there's that the idea is that provides a financial incentive for maybe not the developers, but for, you know, the regular property owners that might want to also build out CDUs for employee housing or for housing for the community. So I think there's two different heads that you all have explored in the recommendations to look at how to incentivize this.
Let's go to Joe's been patient and glad.
The group's aware that there are numerous caretaker units out there that are subject to previous deed restrictions. I assume, those are already in place, so.
Looking at our staff, and yes.
Yeah, yes, and do you want me to
Please.
go a little further? Just, right, they're all being restricted today. It's a very limited restriction in terms of, all it says is, if you rent it, it has to be able to a local resident, or you can have immediate family. Doesn't require you to rent it, doesn't tell you how much you can rent it for, doesn't say anything about the qualifications. So there is a deed restriction that has very limited restrictions to it. So
And it counts in.
I think the point of a deed restriction that would require something to be applied is my understanding of what Jessica is talking about. So there are various levels of deed restriction and how restricted they are. I think that's important to understand.
Point, Glenn.
Yeah, I mean, Suzanne just got to some of it. I don't understand. I didn't understand that Jessica's comment or the whole comment about deed restrictions, because CDUs are deed restricted already. So what you're suggesting is that the restriction be changed in the future in some way, correct?
So the way that I understand, again, I'm not at the May 3rd meeting, but the way that I understand it is that there's a desire to support CDUs and wanting to encourage people to do that, and that may or may not come with its own deed restriction, so, or own set of restrictions for those CDUs as we're trying to encourage those.
Yeah,
But-
we didn't talk about changing the deed restriction. We just said that to create CDUs as an incentive, there could be a floor area bonus, but we didn't discuss changing the deed restriction.
And I don't think I ever knew that there was an implied deed restriction or an understood deed restriction that exists because of the term.
It's more than implied.
It's code.
Yeah, you have to file a deed restrictions for CDU.
Yeah, because you have ADU and CDU.
It's just that with the limited restriction as Suzanne has suggested, it counts against your square footage available.
And so that was the motion that was made and added where it made sense, because deed restrictions are already applied to CDUs, as we've just heard. Michael, do you want to amend your motion? Because I think the deed restriction is already inherent in the CDU definition, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everybody else is on the same page there. Is that, Jessica, is that the way you're concerned, what CDU clearly means? I think, Suzanne, what you said is that like the real employee serving employee housing aspect of what's written now really isn't there, right?
Correct.
And So I think our intent is to make sure those employees. So Jessica's point is, I think maybe the more precise way to put it, knowing what we know now, would be that the current language is changed in, such a way that the CDU will house an employee. Right, there's.
Yeah, when you get the bonus, so that's housing an actual employee that is qualified through APSHA, it's not a family member.
So just the fact that there is a deed restriction, I think what we're hearing is that it's a fairly meaningless deed restriction.
You were getting close to, I'm kind of confused by
Miles?
this. Hearing that the deed restriction was so weak. I could only vote for this if I knew, from when they sell that house, that the CDU stays in place with a deed restriction. That's one of the, I think, abuses of the program. But, it has to be, I don't know whether it has to be under APSHA, but it certainly has to have some rules attached to it. Beyond just saying the words deed restriction. What Suzanne just mentioned was so watered down, you can have your family in there. Well, do we really want to be giving away bonus square footage?
It's not bonus square footage, but.
It's not bonus.
This one.
This would be, that is.
You have a housing employee to get the bonus, but, the CDU that you're concerned about counts in your square footage.
Counts for that.
Counts against your square footage. So you're not getting a bonus square footage.
So we are proposing CDU B2. Correct. 2.0.
Yes.
2.0.
Yeah.
I do think this proposal is worth looking at because she has a lot of good ideas. It's about 2.5 pages. And I would be willing to read it out loud if the committee would like to hear it.
Yeah.
I just were done when I remember.
Yeah, I think we gotta finish the sort of house and I feel like now. What Jessica was proposing is maybe the right solution. We just need to be clear that CDU, as you say, Tim, is like is a V2 CDU that is deed restricted to sort of employee qualification standards, though not necessarily chosen by the trade.
Who's gonna enforce it?
Who's gonna enforce it, is what Bill was asking. If it's just deed restriction, I think you could.
Deed restriction would either run to the benefit of APSHA or it would run to the benefit of the county. Recent CDUs with deed restricted have run to the benefit of the county, then the enforcement is on the county.
Did you hear that, Bill?
I did. I mean, back in the 80s, when the city introduced the ADU system, the big discussion was, should it be a carrot or a stick? Should we require that it be an employee? It was all talked about as an employee unit, but we never put into that legislation that it was required. We just thought the goodwill of the owners without Big Brother looking over their shoulders was a more balanced way to approach it. Of the 250 or so of those units that were built, only 50% of them were ever used for affordable housing. Now that added to the stock, but we sure could have used that other 125 units. And they weren't used because we didn't restrict it clearly enough.
So it sounds like we're making a case for deed restriction.
Right, well, and Mike, since we didn't know that, we're down maybe a clarification on revising. The definition is more reading that.
Yeah, I think so. It says revise CDU restriction to require housing. For yeah, I think that maybe as written takes us too far back to like the scenario that Andy was saying no one will agree to, right? And, so I think it needs to maybe it's an applicant qualified, but not excluded.
Can I just offer some context for you all to kind of discuss? I think as part of the working group, a lot of the discussion around the CDU was allowing it more than it exists today, right? So a lot of what you talked about is how to encourage it without outside of the UGB to make it not part of your square footage cap. And so that's what the intent was that a lot of you discussed. We didn't get into the details of the deed restriction of what it is today and what it needs to be in the future. So one piece to offer is you really have two components you all were looking at as you think about CDUs for affordable housing. One, making them, incentivizing them to be permitted more easily throughout the county. And then I think the other piece that I'm hearing that you all are talking is clearly a need to look at how those deed restrictions operate, when they should be required versus when they won't be required, and changing and strengthening the language. And so rather than coming up with details of what it should be today, perhaps there's a bullet of how the deed restriction and the language should be revised based on how you're revising your CDU recommendations as well.
If you get a bonus, it's gotta be rented. And that's the area of abuse, maybe. I mean, if it's just deed restricted, as you've heard, nobody rents them, they just traditional. And so the argument or the discussion about whether if you want to use your square footage for it or not is one thing, but if it's gonna be a bonus, it needs to be really well managed. And that's the hard part. I think that, as Debbie said, it's a huge barrier. You get an additional 500 or 1,000 square feet, but you got to employ, you got to put somebody in it. Even if it's your chef, that's fine. Yeah, so that's the hard part. How do you?
Glenn has his hand up on.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, is that new hand or old hand? New hand.
No, it's a new hand. I just think what we should be getting at is study revisions to the caretaker dwelling unit definition and deed restrictions if there's going to be a bonus for them. I mean, that's kind of what we're getting to is if there's going to be a bonus for caretaker dwelling units, then reassess and redefine the definition and the deed restriction. Because in the county, the reason for doing the CDUs originally in the 80s was just as Bill said, it was to give owners the option of doing it, and there was no real teeth in the restriction because they figured, well, if some of them go into the caretaker dwelling unit use for employees, fine. But it was that was the extent of it. It was given a lot of teeth. Maybe the new type of unit should have some more teeth in the restriction.
That's my point.
This doesn't have enough teeth. Is that what we're feeling? That this doesn't have enough teeth, so we can add some language to it. Can we go to Kara's point that rather than trying to figure this out, because it feels a little clunky and a little clumsy for me, but maybe we can add some language to that. We don't have to do it tonight. Yeah.
And I apologize for muddling the things up. There's the caretaker dwelling unit, which is deed restricted. An accessory dwelling unit, you can build with your own square footage.
Yeah.
And is not deed restricted. So just, right, or no?
There's no ADU.
There's no ADU.
All we have is caretaker dwelling.
Oh.
It is deed restricted, it's not very restrictive. I never know how to put that right. And it does count towards your floor area. So, but yeah, I couldn't tell you what percent of those are out there in the county that are actually occupied by a local working resident, but I can say it's pretty low.
So this is the B2 that was Tim's calling B2. This restricts it. It allows you to create a caretaker and you can add 500 to 1,000 square feet. It's not APSHA qualifications, but it's not APSHA knowledge. So, yeah. So we're all good with that. And then we talked about incentivizing the CDU.
And we want to move forward.
Well, no, I think my proposal is good now. So, I think,
And like, we've actually drafted up based on all the discussion, a potential addition that captures this. Is we think that we might want to entertain a motion to report what was previously on the table to capture this discussion.
you're on the screen.
Okay.
I'm not on the Zoom, so I'm gonna read it, but so it would be a new bullet that would say, if a floor area bonus is permitted. Reassess and redefine the deed restrictions for CDUs, take lessons learned from the past within MMT. And that bullet would be added to your recommendations.
Didn't really hear that.
Sorry, if a floor area bonus for CDUs is permitted, reassess and redefine the deed restrictions for CDUs. Take lessons learned from the past that didn't have enough teeth.
It's nice enough to get consensus and doesn't actually say anything. Sorry. I think what Mona said is exactly right. It's about, it is qualifying an actual employee, but it is not managed, and APTA is not telling you who is in that unit. But you're getting 1,000 square feet. How long have we talked about how much square footage should be allowed on parcels in Pickens County? And we're just gonna give away 1,000 square feet additional and not have an employee in those 1,000 square feet. It just feels antithetical to the things that we've been talking about as a group. And so I would go with Mona's language as a suggestion that it is qualified through APSHA, but not APSHA managed.
Do you want to make a motion?
Sure, okay.
Well, I think so. One of the things that's kind of ties to another bonus area in this packet, which is the subgrade bonus of 1,000 square feet, which requires a TDR. I think we just need to add that this does not require a TDR to get that bonus. I think that's the intent, but I think that should be clarified.
So are you suggesting a TDR to be?
No, that we should clarify that a TDR is not required.
Oh, okay. So let's see, did you have allow, apply a 500 to about, I make a motion that we change that wording of the bullet to say apply 500 to 1,000 square foot floor area bonus. With caretaker dwelling unit that would be restricted, then occupants will be APTA qualified, but not APTA managed. And will not require a TDR to secure that additional square footage. Right?
Who would manage it?
To explain just the way that the units work with APSHA now. An owner has a unit, they need to find a tenant. And so they go, if a tenant comes to them, they say, you have to go to APSHA, fill out your paperwork and come back to me as a qualified person before I sign a lease that is then shared with APSHA.
It's how
so many of the
developers collective residents work already, right? Like, so if a private developer builds an employee housing complex, they might have 2 or 3 of the units that they get to place people, but those people have to be qualified for that. It's not an unprecedented concept.
Right, no, it's not.
And is there an occupancy requirement, take on, and the women people are in town or have their stuff, have their leaves, and I don't know, 15 or 16 a year.
So that would not be the option qualification, okay, then they're out for your.
You have the qualifications as a local employee, and if you're talking about it being, full-time occupied, basically, that this is required.
So that actually list as elements here. Already.
Yeah.
And so there's a motion on the table from Madam Co-Chair. Do you want to entertain the addition of just clarifying that it was not required TDR into your?
I stated it.
Yeah, okay, perfect. I just wanted to make 100% clear
Yes.
that we're all on the same page with the motion on the table, which would be to make sure I got it. And
We're gonna motion. Yeah, we're gonna try to. Just. Take the folks online, let's try not to be speaking. If we don't, sorry.
Yes. Would this satisfy the employee requirement, employee housing requirement
that the employment requirement of a developer.
CDUs today are not mitigation units, so they do not meet the requirement. You couldn't use that rather than pay the required impact fee. So assuming, so I guess that would be question going forward. But right now they are not for mitigation.
And have you, in this, addressed the cash in lieu? You haven't done it like that.
Yeah, it's in there. But there is a motion on the table.
And I'll second the motion.
And to restate what that motion is, it would be apply a 500 to 1,000 square foot floor area bonus with a deed restricted caretaker dwelling unit CDU that would be occupied by an APTRA qualified but not APTRA managed employee. That clear, and it would not require a TDR.
APTRA managed,
Okay, so that would be APTRA qualified but not APTRA managed and not subject to TDRs.
And
That sounds,
there's
Well, we've got a motion on the
did we capture the occupancy requirement in there that Suzanne mentioned? Yeah, that's. all.
Yeah. Yeah. So one more time for the good of the order, apply a 500 to 1,000 square foot floor area bonus with a deed restricted caretaker dwelling unit that would be APTRA qualified but not APTRA managed and would not require a TDR. That is the motion that has been seconded, so we take the vote.
On favor?
We've got it. All opposed. Yeah. Cliff, Tim, Blake. I see some random thumbs going up online, so if you're online, keep your hand up if you're opposed. I think I just said Blake, any others?
Brian, thumbs up, right, for on, like.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Brian. Excellent, so. Yeah, 20-2, motion passes.
I got
20-3.
Oh, 20-3, apologies, sorry, like,
Go ahead.
Besides on the square footage.
That's to be determined. There's a lot of stuff in here that's to be determined.
Would the bonus be decided in you?
so I think we've wrestled the deed restriction component to the ground. Is there anything else in this affordable housing recommendation that we feel merits further discussion?
Maybe one comment on a bigger project and that has to do with density. And there's a statement in the migration to the mountain report about density not being a topic for public input. So that if an area is determined to be able to handle a certain density and it's in the master plan and zoned accordingly, then density doesn't become an argument to kill the project. I think that's the direction that the state of Colorado might be taking with some of the things we're talking about in this new legislation. And it's kind of a threshold issue for communities that are trying to build workforce housing in areas that are appropriate, that are transit oriented or whatever. And get, sort of debauched by people who just don't believe that it's appropriate. And so they've just taken that discussion off the table and said, here's the zoning, here's the master plan. It's been approved, it's been through the process, it's had public input, but then this is sort of where the NIMBYism starts to play a role is, we don't want this to ruin our small town character or create more traffic. And it starts to really amplify the negativity about projects like this. And I think that the message that we need to send is, look, we're going to try to pick appropriate places for appropriate development. And we cannot keep getting pushed to the curb every time somebody wants to try to do the right thing, quote unquote.
I think if I may, that's here, which is like under the heading allow affordable housing beyond the usual needs, the second bullet says allow larger affordable housing density within a highly corridor if it meets the parameter. Basically,
I want to make sure we just, there's an old saying in our business, repeat, repeat, repeat. And as we messaging to the commissioners, there's two things that need to be put in the category.
You know, and I think that's a good point, that rest for affordable housing, hopefully is represented in the intent of this section of your recommendation. So, are there any other pieces of this affordable housing recommendation?
One comment or one thing to discuss is on funding and incentives. So the first bullet point is explore all diverse mechanisms of funding affordable housing, and then under the in this, we're leaving this whole committee process with incredibly valuable TDRs for rural remote preservation, an incredibly valuable program of TDRs for residents to cash in on their property value, and then just the words explore and encourage, because this all comes down to funding in the end. And so I think that having something that's a little bit more just stronger going to the commissioners. I mean, it's, you know, there's the ballot measure on affordable housing that's being considered. Just ways that we should look at funding, because none of this is going to happen without funding. It's a little bit unfortunate the timing of the ballot measure now, the property tax.
So, Morgan, would you propose like prioritize as a different
I mean,
word change
I
there?
just say implement tax, add to the mill levy. And our proposal is an encouragement to the commissioners, but if it comes from our group, it's not like we're enacting anything. So I would just say that in an ideal world, we would have actually a mill levy for affordable housing as we do for schools and open space and fire protection districts.
Do you want the language, are you suggesting we're gonna need the language to be that specific? Like add a mill levy to financially support affordable housing?
Yes, why not?
But second, but it's not just a tax, you can add, like, increase the affordable housing fee, like getting to vote, there's other avenues, so that's where I was reading into, trying to find it right now, but that's what I was interpreting, that kind of vague statement that Morgan pointed out, but I think it would be helpful having some sub bullet points to say, such as taxes, other fees, or other avenues to get that additional funding. How does that work with Taker?
Yes, can see
Yeah, you vote on it.
You guys did a good job. Say what you want.
So you're kind of saying you're making a motion here, and I'm thinking that Nick is making a little an amendment.
Sorry.
I think the motion would be just have a bullet point that says, have it's basically just for the ballot measure.
Can I,
Or is
maybe
that-
after, what if it's this, because I hate for you to say mill levy and it evolves
Right.
or changes, so what if it's create a dedicated, well-supported funding source for housing?
That's
Is that-
that's a bad idea. Kara's got a good idea there.
If you wanted to add more clarity, but I'm speaking like a dedicated, some housing and dedicated and well-funded. source.
Yeah, and I think part of that is because the only other way that we have to capture funding for affordable housing is through mitigation fees during development and redevelopment. Whereas if you have a property tax and it actually created substantial.
So I'll amend for all of you, create a dedicated funding source for housing such as property or sales tax measure.
Yes.
And I seconded that to clarify what Kara just mentioned, because there's RETA, there's sales tax, there's property taxes, there's mitigation fees. And, you know, we may have to split the sales tax with a open space that's already funded well.
They just add another,
Another decrease.
0.25.
So, you know, this all just experienced a nice windfall of $900,000. You know, half of it, some's going into arts and the rest of it. For the farm side, you know, it's gotta be there, it's gotta be in this.
And I would add, if I could just to make another amendment to it, just to, I would say, in addition to the recalibrated or redirected mitigation and impact fees, because we do talk about changing the use of the mitigation and impact fees in that section to aim more on affordable housing. So we don't imply that this is the sole source, but it is in addition to other sources that are being proposed in this document.
So we kind of move those people together.
Well, just make sure that the bullet that seems to be sort of putting the flag in for creating affordable housing funding, that it is not, the information is not that it is the sole source of it.
Great, okay.
Yeah, and so Morgan, you made the motion, I think it was seconded by Rick. And kind of amended third in with other amendments. I'm just gonna restate it to make sure Morgan captures your intent and then we can move it forward. So it would be adding a bullet that is created dedicated and well-funded source for affordable housing, such as property and sales tax measures, in addition to the updated impact fees.
Perfect.
And so that does the motion and the second hold, Rick?
Yeah.
Can you say mitigation and impact fees, just because that's.
Mitigation and-
that section is.
I'm adding that. Anyone unclear on the motion? Those online, can you hear us okay?
Those, we heard it.
Excellent. So all in favor?
You know what? What should we? Can you read it again?
Yeah, I couldn't.
You bet, of course. We want to make sure this is super important and we all want to make sure we're clear 100% what we're voting on. So the motion is create a dedicated and well-funded source for affordable housing funding, such as property and sales tax measures, in addition to updated mitigation and impact fees. Of course. So, sorry, Mickey, I'll do this again one more time. All in favor? Christie, were you hand up? I'll oppose.
All opposed is on the table.
Any opposed?
Cliff, are you opposed?
Well, I'm in the middle.
You got two, you're only got two choices down.
Okay, any other opposed online? None online, just motion carries.
And we did violate T, but we voted on it.
That's right. 22-1, motion carries. Any other comments on the affordable housing recommendations before we decide to vote on adding it to the table of recommendations as a whole? We see the table as a whole and adding affordable housing as amended.
Yes.
Excellent. So the motion on the table, I'm going to bring on screen just so we can all see it. And essentially, you've heard me say it about 5 times by now, but does the committee support the recommendation? And instead of from the working group, I'm going to change it to as amended into the report.
Are you asking a question for this now?
Yeah, I'm just gonna amend this really quickly, but that is the question on the table.
One more time. Third on the board. Do we say yes to this as we have amended the bullets that we just talked about? Adding the affordable housing to the whole of the table.
Yeah, so the process for the vote, will be, but just like we've done with all of our major votes so far, we're just gonna go around the table and you can vote yes or no on adding affordable housing as amended into the report, and we'll just go yes, no, and any commentary you want to add with your voters as well. So, more to start with you.
Great, I vote yes, let's add it in to the table.
I vote yes, and many, many thanks to the group that got together to help with this.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
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 Yes. Excellent, and for those online, hopefully you had enough time to see the screen and motions on the table. Let's go around starting, and if you can unmute, Christy, we'll start with you and then go to Glenn.
Yes.
Thanks, Christy. Glenn. Blake.
Yes.
Jennifer.
Yes.
Bill.
Yes, and all kudos to the committee for doing the work they did to bring this to us so quickly and succinctly in time to do this today.
Thank you, Bill. Forrest.
Yes.
Sierra.
Heck, yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously.
Very good, Flanagan.
Way to end it, Sierra, thank you. So I'm going to go back to our presentation here. After discussing affordable housing, we're going to turn our attention now to the report as a whole. We're going to adopt the affordable housing recommendation as amended into this final document. And now we want to look at the final report. So Michael, Mona, any preface that you want to give as I pull up the screen?
Yeah, so, I think, again, obviously, we've looked at the table a lot. We've essentially approved it last week for last meeting. What you haven't seen is the co-chair that needs to come, that you hopefully saw, and then the remaining chapters 2 through 7 that are the synopsis of what we did, what we learned, kind of milestone values, improvements, and guideposts that we came to along the way. So we could, like, I would like to change a couple of things about the co-chair letter. I think that we can set up the argument for the whole report us to table in a little bit of a clearer way to the commissioner and people who maybe are seeing it for the first time. Say chapters 1 through 7, along with a synopsis of the work that we did, the learning, but then it's section 8, which is really chapter 8 is our work. That's the thing that we made. That's our. And so I have a proposed new paragraph that I have to put into the co-chair letter that states that a little more explicitly, so it makes the report unfold a little bit more logically. Since we sent it to you, we added page numbers to the table of contents. This feels like it has more structure and more argumentative flow. And then the other thing that I think I would really like to do is propose that we create a better beginning to this outcomes table. I think that it doesn't, which is on page 29. That I think it needs to arrive with more importance. I think it needs to be explained a little bit better. There are 4 columns. Here are their headings. Here are what those headings mean. I think that we can just set it up a bit better, given its importance. So those are the kinds of suggestions that I'm going to make, kind of more macro structural suggestions to the overall report. But we can talk about things. You want to pick a line out, you can, but we're hoping we're not. We're moving past that.
When you can take a vote on a failure package.
So, does that mean that there are no edits once we vote? That's it, or you're going to continue to incorporate changes?
So the way we talked about it is that, you know, like, clarity stuff, there would be no substantive changes made after today, like we do on this, you know, we don't change a number from 500 to 1,000, because we feel like it, you know, it's, we fix the typos, if there's a clear repetition, redundancy, we might smooth some of that out, but nothing substantive.
Well, could I just make a couple of comments? Page numbers, great. Page numbers indicate what content. Yeah. And I don't know if it's because I'm so familiar with the subject matter, we all are. First, let me just say that I appreciate so much the work on the prologue you guys did. It was great. I do acknowledge your paragraph if you want to add there, but in general, that preface was terrific. But I did find getting to section 8, the meat, long and somewhat repetitive. And I can't identify exactly what the repetition is, but it seemed like all right already. Point has been made. So I asked that you just review that. It may, for a newcomer, it may be just fine, I don't know, but that was my overall impression.
I agree with you. Sorry, go ahead. Bill, was that you about to say something?
But Tim, I think is just asking for some editing because he feels like there's too much repetition. And it's a document that we want people to read and really zero in on. And it maybe just is another editing process that might go on before it goes to the BOCC on the 6th, not changing anything of high importance that we've been voting on all along, but just seeing if it could be edited down a little more succinctly. Is that what you're after, Tim?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Cliff is next bill.
A couple of points of clarification you get into this. Okay, so on page 31, there's a floor area ratio and allowable floor area. That chart's been in our package in that part of it. That list of acreage with square foot cap. Why is that there? We essentially voted, and it's further in and we're ahead of it. This, but why is this there? I kind of don't want to give EOCC another option, but it's like what we're recommending. That's what that, you know, it's not all that to be.
Yeah. From previous meetings that we've since moved well.
Wait, but can you restate the page?
31 on the packet you gave me today.
The second bullet, for example, on Collins Fire scale upgrades.
Yeah.
The clarity, why it has retained in there is one of the discussions when you voted on it was the last point, that is the starting point at which any floor area ratio should be explored. So that was the discussion on that, is using that as the starting point.
I would eliminate this.
I would second that for sure.
Yeah.
An additional concern that we have about the AR2, or just, it just comes down to the first bullet point, is that if I'm a realtor and I see this big report come out and I start flipping through this and I see a number that's anything less than 5750, I'm gonna freak out and go and yell at the commissioners. And I don't want that number of 4920 to tank any of our but it'll, and the other recommendations that puts much work into, if people kind of get my drift with that.
I've seen a lot of nodding heads and striking the sub bullets here.
This appears at least twice, doesn't it? It appears somewhere else.
This is the only place it appears.
This is your representation. I don't need to give an example. Right, and get away from 4920 and up, get away from 15K.
Yeah.
It's.
I would leave the italicized note, because I do think that's important, where it says that the absolute house size cap will supersede floor area ratio as recommended by this committee. That's just saying that we are recognizing 9250 as an absolute cap. But I agree, I would get rid of the example and the numbers.
And just leave that, after house as its own next bullet.
Or as a asterisk to the first one.
And so just to be clear, we want to strike the entire thing, leaving the italicized text, or leave the current AR2 plus additional scale for large parcels as a starting point in there, strike the entire thing.
Which page are you on right now, Miles?
We are on, Bill, we are on page 31 of the document, second bullet under floor area ratio that starts with, for example, and I believe the motion on the floor is to cut that entire bullet and its sub bullets, but retain the italicized text. Is that correct? I could put it with that.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to second that motion? We vote on it? Okay. Okay, motion on the table to delete, for those online, hopefully you can hear me, on page 30, under floor area ratio, delete the second bullet that starts with for example, and all of its sub bullets, and retain the italicized text. The motion has been seconded. All in favor? I'm seeing unanimous in the room. Anyone opposed online? Sierra? Christie?
Christie?
Okay. No one opposed. If that is incorrect, please alert me now. Motion passes 23-0. We will remove the second bullet on page 31 under recommendation that starts with, for example, retaining the italicized text.
Oh, Miles.
That was one. Page 24. Second bullet, near the top, two finding. This is regarding GMQS. I need some clarity on what is meant by an opportunity that exists to reform GMQS to make it more competitive with a scoring system that is more relevant to core values and goals. Elsewhere in the packet, in the draft, we are eliminating the competition. So I'm assuming that this is only applies to an application to the NQS.
Right.
Okay, but scoring system is one of my pet peeves at PNC for years. I was under the impression that scoring was going to go away with specific. And there's no detail of what that means, scoring system. And I've seen the nightmares of this scoring system in the past. So clarify or kill.
And so have you looked at the square footage closed system? You don't see that what you're looking for there now, because some of them.
No, this. I'm talking about a specific sheet that we were given every time we had that P&Z that we had to score an application for GMQS, both the competition and that scoring system had a lot of inequities in it. And I felt it only led to more growth. That's why everybody. So when I see that little scoring system.
I think Kara's got a clarification.
So I think that, so as a reminder, and I'm gonna use the words. Competition as in your recommendation remains for subdivision and development, right? Of a parcel. Not competition does not remain for additional floor area. So the bullet you were reading is related to maintaining the growth management quota system for subdivision, but revamping the competition that it reflects all the other recommendations that would be implemented as part of special review.
But it's not the same scoring system for subdivision that you dealing with in the past.
Right.
Okay, thank you. That's why I need some clarity.
Yeah.
And look, I think that's a great example when we got it on the screen here, that as we review this, we know you haven't had it for a long time. If there's clerical, non-material suggestions that you all want to make after tonight, that is something that we will continue to refine to Michael's point. There's opportunities, this is a big document, to edit, to streamline, to make it more readable. So this is important.
Oh.
So, from what you said, for example, just going through this, this is a very robust, dense document. So my big overriding question is, we could stay here all night and do this. So do you have an idea of the process you want to use to do this? And I mean, just for example, the guiding principles, you know, doing nothing is not an option, that one, well, it appears 3 times before page 29. So, I mean, you can go through that, and I can tell you, do we really need it on page 8, 21, and 29? Or do we just need it once? So, but that's just an example. So could you give us some guidance about how you want to input?
Absolutely.
Or can I order dinner?
That is the that we started with from our interest is, are we ready to vote on this package as a whole, knowing there will be many clerical adjustments that we need to make between now and May 22nd. But the fundamental question is, what will appear through this? Are there any final material changes to address? Because we could.
I have one, Miles.
Bill, thank you, Bill. We'll get to you in just 1 second. I just want to make sure that the group's comfortable with the process. Because I think tonight is the night to address any material changes before we vote on this package as a whole. There can be all sorts of editorial clerical changes that we can make to really refine this document, and we will continue to make until it's submitted to the VSTC and PMC. But we want to make sure if there's anything material that we get it on the table tonight. And Bill, thank you for your patience.
I just have a material change on page 37. Let's see, I'm sorry, top of page 38 under performance standards. I think we really failed by not going the extra yard here. The first bullet says, create a path for electrifying all buildings in Pitkin County. I know we've discussed this during the course of the 20 weeks, and I had suggested this early on in a couple of the smaller sessions. I think we need to follow the lead of Crested Butte and prohibit any more gas hookups for powering or energy for all new construction in Pitkin County.
It's actually on page 39 on our version, Bill. I know you're at home and you probably got a slightly different version than what's in the room. But top of page 39, the bullet that Bill is referencing is create a path for electrifying all buildings in Pitkin County. And Bill, just to clarify, I think what you're proposing, that does not go far enough.
It doesn't go far enough, and what it implies, and we've talked about, is that it dovetails with the county's proposal by 2030, you know, to be 65% all renewable energy or whatever. There's a general phrase they use. I mean, why wait 7 years with what we can do with reducing the carbon footprint starting upon approval of this, if the county would go that far? I think it would be dynamic. I think it would be catch the attention of people like Crested Butte's proposal did. They did a lot of research on it, and they're underway with it, and it's working.
We've got that in here though, at the top of performance standards. First paragraph says require all new and redeveloped homes to be all electric and powered by 100% renewable energy.
Yeah, you can't do that. Yes,
Right.
Right. Bill, does that first bullet on the very
Well, you know,
top-
I saw that one, and all right, I'll accept that. I'll accept that.
Still matter, in my opinion, of saying no man.
I think that gets it for me. I think it really does.
It takes it from a negative to a positive.
Yep.
Christie, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just real quick, every affordable housing is so critical. And there are many references in the document that the impact and mitigation fees will go towards that. I'm wondering if we could also include also to retrofit existing houses to become more energy efficient. It's more like a question to the committee. I feel like we sort of lost the discussion of assigning funding to help the climate goal with existing stock. Do we want to put anything in this document about that? Because I don't think we really saw that unless REMP is going to fund it all. But I think that we're just really talking about impact fees a lot. And what's the committee's thoughts about?
I was also wondering about that, Christy, and about what if this set of recommendations adequately addresses what REMP needs to go forward. We didn't really talk about that too much, but I feel like this could be our moment.
I agree with Christie, that there needs to be more clarity about that. 42% in the county of the carbon footprint is, as we all know, comes from the as-built environment, and it's almost 60% in the valley-wide. And we need to really ask the county commissioners to either create more funding than is already there, not just funding, say, for core by itself, but designate that funding for conversion of houses from natural gas to electricity. And I just think it needs to be a little bit more powerful and more clear to the county commissioners so that they really know that this is something that has to be done.
One idea is to propose creating a green revolving fund for that, so that those savings could be accrued and used to deploy for more energy efficiency. I don't think the city has anything like that now.
Well, I think something like that would be good. I mean, there could be something that we could try to craft verbally today that would say that the homeowner contributes, but we can't talk about how much they would contribute a certain amount. And then the county would create maybe some low interest loans with banks in town, and they might back those up. And thirdly, they would power it financially directly, but probably using an organization like the Community Office of Resource Efficiency, CORE, to implement it. And it couldn't be used for administration for CORE or anything like that. It would have to all go toward the conversion.
And I was thinking of something even simpler than all those fabulous out of the box ideas, which is just in the entire mitigation and impact fee sections, both on page 25, where it's referenced at a summary level, and then farther into the document, is every time it says they'll go to affordable housing, it's comma, and funding the retrofit of the existing core. And then others more brilliant can figure that out. I just felt like it had been lost even in the impact and mitigation discussion fees.
So we've got a proposal here to exist. I don't think we have the exact language that we want to incorporate here. Regarding some type of fee that could be, or funding source that would be created to incentivize the electrification of existing homes, right?
Right. Well, no, use the existing ideas about these increased impact fees to go in one of two ways: affordable housing and retrofitting houses. That decision, I feel, kind of needs to be made.
Christy, Michael here, what if like it happened to be a leading recommendation within mitigation and impact fees? Right now, the first bullet just says, get more out of current mitigation fees. And maybe we could look to sort of round it up there.
Right. Yeah, we don't have to solve it now. If everybody sort of generally agrees, we need to include it. That's all I want to do is make sure the authors had some input on that. You guys come up with it.
I would be supportive of that.
And does everyone feel like that's where we could land that, a better top bullet for mitigation impact fees?
What page is that on?
That's on the 54.
What page, Miles?
There's 54 for those of us with the crayon here, and taking up the 80 and 53 for you.
Can you say what that statement might be?
Yeah.
So break it down, it would be a bullet point, that says, look at how rent can fund retrofits of existing homes to meet new performance standards.
And where is that, Kara?
It's a bullet point added to the mitigation impact fee section.
What page, Kara?
Oh, no, I just created it.
Oh, you did? Oh, good. Okay.
So let's restate that one more time for everybody, to address these. It would be a new bullet at the top of page 54, is that correct?
Yeah.
That reads.
Look at rent to fund retrofits of existing housing stock to meet new performance standards.
And will REMP still exist?
Well, REMP is shrinking because the
Right.
codes in both the city and the county particularly, are already moving so fast and well toward net zero that less money is coming into the carbon fee called REMP, the program that's been so helpful over the last 20 years plus. And so, well, Kara, I just worry because that fund is shrinking, that it won't really be able to do what we need it to do.
So let me make this quick adjustment because I think there's two pieces. So look at revenues and expenditures to fund retrofits of existing homes to meet new performance standards. So it provides the recommendation of how additional funds can be captured differently.
And I will point to the next bullet in the recommendation, which says recommend reevaluation of impact fees, road, renewable energy and affordable housing to capture more impacts. But I think, Bill, that is where we are trying to suggest, say even that REMP is shrinking and that we need to reevaluate what we're getting. So I view that second bullet as a sort of recharge, re-energize REMP.
Right. And on page 25, the deliberations bullet under mitigation impact fees, at the very end of that deliberations bullet, such as affordable housing and retrofitting existing house stock to be more energy efficient.
That's a good idea. Both of those are good ideas. Michael's, yours, and Christie's, I think, and Kara's language is okay.
What I'm hearing, I think about you, just the same line, and really revise that first bullet to get more out of current mitigation fees to prioritize energy retrofits. Could it be that?
And don't forget page 25.
Christine, thank you. Page 25 is being written in all capital letters right here.
And for us, that's
I mean, I gotta say, my husband drove our RV out of the desert today to Wi-Fi just so I could say a few things today. I'm sitting in my RV. See, there we are. There's, okay.
Where are you, Combe Ridge?
Dedication of this committee, and Christine, thank you so much. I love the dedication of not just you, this entire committee. Thank you so much. We'll make that amendment. Is anyone opposed to the amendment that has just been stated?
I'm not opposed, but I keep thinking about how many ways we've connected through all these different recommendations to the overarching goal of 2030 and 2050 of reduced emissions. And if you start picking out little single individual bullets and trying to reinforce them, it takes away the value of the bigger thing that we've created. And I think that's, we have building codes that are going to change, that are going to enforce electrical conversions on new development, remodels. We have other backup controls in place. This is a bigger vision document that says, we're gonna keep repeating the same things over and over and over to our elected officials. And they're gonna figure out where the pieces fall in any particular development. And they're gonna have to read this. I mean, this is, I've seen 400 packets, and some of them are 290 pages. I'll admit, I've never read all of everything in every single packet, but this one is gonna be the anchor for whatever happens over the next 10, 20 years here. And so I think that if we get too target on one thing, we may lose the value that we've attached to another thing. And it starts to get diluted, and then we start talking about individual buckets instead of the bigger collective impact that it has. So I would encourage us to, kind of try to stay away from micromanaging each of these recommendations, and just put it out there. And let staff and any of us that want to show up on June 6th or whatever it is, to provide input to the elected officials about what we meant to say.
I would say that Christie's point is not micro, but macro. He is saying that we are missing a large opportunity, which is to create funding to retrofit existing homes, which are really macro. They are a big chunk of the problem.
They are.
And so
I'll change my word, but I also think we brought up that we have to look at funding for every one of these recommendations in a different light. Whether it's RETA, sales tax, bill levy, rent, whatever it is, mitigation, school, impact to schools, impact to fire departments, impact to the hospital, whatever it might be. That all has to go through the lens of change and get figured out.
yeah, I mean, so that's even more macro, which is to say, like, I think it was pretty point, like she's made it a lot in this process, which is we need to figure out how to pay for some of this stuff, and we need to make sure that we are recognizing that opportunity within this. So like I think we've tried to do that, maybe too specifically now in that first mitigation bullet, because it says it went from being extremely general to very specific by pointing to the energy retrofits. Like, I think, I think the point you're making, right, is that mitigation impact fee section, which in some ways can be sort of rephrased, how you pay for this section.
Runs through the whole document, the whole theme runs through this whole document.
Right, there is a section that is about money, right? Like about finding money, and I believe that's the mitigation and impact fee section, right?
Correct, 100%.
And yeah, and I think I'm agreeing with your point. I'm agreeing with Christie's point. I'm feeling like maybe like that is a critical macro point that is not a small dialogue, the big dialogue, it's the money. And we want to make sure that it's significant enough, and that it's aimed at the right places that we think and need to be prioritized, which,
And
Michael,
maybe
those are good points, Michael, and just the staff and the consultant should bear that in mind as they prepare whatever is approved today and taken to the BOCC.
because the thing is that like a lot of good ideas, like when they reach the sausage making stage, die on the cross of who's going to pay for
Did
this.
you say tofu? Or you used the word sausage, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Excuse me. Tofu. I'm just kidding.
Anyway.
Michael, I see exactly what you're saying. Maybe this is a great cutback to the macro, what we want more of and less of that's clearly articulated in this report. So instead of getting more out of current mitigation fees to prioritize energy one target, it should be to prioritize the things that we want to see more of, such as energy retrofits of existing stock, affordable housing. There could be a couple such as there that really might start with the macro, but provide some specificity on the micro.
Yeah, and I think Christie's point was really specifically about retrofitting existing homes is a huge opportunity. We found a place to land that in the mitigation section. But like her point is actually not, we need to, it's that we need to figure out how to do that big picture thing of helping existing home retrofit. We've got a little bit of it in that residential TDR, that 10% of the money has to go to retrofitting the home if you're gonna sell off future square footage. But I think I agree with her, we can try to find a way to get to that. In other places and the mitigations where we chose to learn that specific thing. And then the conversation has led us to realizing that, like, this money that potentially is really significant. We need to make sure that it's acknowledged for its potential and, some of the places we can aim at for all stakeholders. Okay, no idea where you take that.
Yeah.
Well,
We actually between this broad point that you just made, and then dive down into some specific. And then we have some specific language that's already been proposed. I would say just keep that first bullet that says get more out of current mitigation fees. You're suggesting such as you have a specific recommendation already on the table.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, why don't
And
we-
those several would include energy retrofits of existing housing stock and affordable housing. That's a slightly amended motion. I'm just gonna expedite this. Anyone unclear on the motion?
Say it again, Miles.
Motion would be to update the first bullet on mitigation impact fees. To get more out of current mitigation fees, to prioritize the things that we want to see more of and less of, such as, and then sub bullets, energy retrofits of existing stock and affordable housing.
Okay, that's okay with me.
Can we add water efficiency in there?
Absolutely. Anyone opposed to adding water efficiency?
Again, we've mentioned the infrastructure requirements for development, which includes water resources, transit, roads, close to proximity to schools, hospitals, emergency responses. All that is layered in there. And water is going to be a self-restrictive conversation around here. I don't know that. It's kind of like we get into this single purpose, single agenda talks. And we forget what's attached to that water system. That water system to expand a mobile home park to from 30 to 150 may not be doable. Period.
So
that may come out in the
that
conversation.
means you're opposed to including water?
No, I just think again, we're starting to split hairs. We're starting to focus on single objectives without keeping in mind that that's connected to everything else. If you have to extend a water line for 20 miles from the city of Aspen to serve somewhere, it's just not going to happen. And water rights are a big deal in Colorado. If you develop a rural and remote and you have rights to a ditch carrying 20 CFS, and you can sell that to a community and they can extend. So there's all these other things that come into the land use process that govern it, including building codes again with low use fixtures. So we keep targeting little individual things, and we'll never get out of the room. And I'm sorry to point that out.
No, I think that's the intent of this.
I'm sitting here thinking about voting on this, and okay, we've got a great product.
Yeah, and Rick, I think you make a great point, and starting with the macro was the intent of that first revision of this amendment, to get more out of these fees for all the things we agree we want to see more of. And then just having a little more specificity where we do get more specific on a couple such as. It doesn't mean it's inclusive, and I don't think you're going to split too many hairs here. Is that the balance we're trying to strike as a group?
So I just need to add a clarification. So as you had, we do not have mitigation fees for water. Right? We have mitigation fees today for housing, for roads, and for energy impacts. So what is in here, what you all have been discussing is getting more out of the impact fees that we collect today and exploring other things. So we do not have mitigation fees for water.
Right, but municipalities and water providers do. tap fees, all those charges that come with an accessory dwelling unit or a CDU, additional kitchens and things like that, that increase the tap fee that the Metro District or a city may charge to tie into the system. So they do exist, but they exist in a different department. A tap fee in, Starwood can run $100,000.
Okay, and again, we're talking about the income, so I know there's a couple people that have their, here, but I just want to make that clarification.
I didn't mean to derail us. If we want to go back to the initial motion, that's fine with me.
I think we should add it, but let's hear what
Jessica,
I have two totally unrelated topics that I would like to get to, so.
okay, well, I think we're close. I think we're close on this one. I'm gonna read it one more time. And to Kara's point, I think, this is getting more out of the impact fee system to prioritize the things we want.
I have one thing I want to say. I think that Cindy said something about zoning like they own their own, like we zone or mitigate it. Water down and say, we'll just pay for it, and they'll allow them to have bigger houses. So if we give them too many opportunities to study and mitigate, then the numbers go up and the houses get bigger. So I think we need to own it like he's owned it, and I wouldn't say. An opportunity to mitigate money.
Right.
So if we get too specific, I have to agree. If we get too specific about mitigate this and do all this money, that's not my intention. I think the intention is to what this says. And so let's not give the county commissioners an opportunity when the community complains, to just do it with mitigation.
I wouldn't say that water is too specific, guys. Water is is probably the most valuable and least available resources that the Western United States has, and probably going to be the single most impactful crisis that we run up against in the next 30 years. So I wouldn't say that that's getting too specific or off in the weeds at all.
I agree, folks.
We are talking about water in the context of mitigation fees, which there currently is not a mitigation fee for water. Water exists as a concern in performance standards and development standards. The conversation is sort of much turned into something that is outside the context of what we are talking about, which is mitigation impact fees, correct?
However, if I can interrupt you, we can allow the use of these mitigation fees to be expanded to include water emission.
For the fee side of it, for the how you spend the money that you got.
Exactly.
Got it, yep, good point.
And to Doug's point, zone it like you mean it, and so much of this recommendation is exactly that. But at the same time, the conversation that we've had with the group is there's also an opportunity to break down the largest barrier to affordable housing, to energy retrofits, which is funding. So it's a bit of, we want our cake and eat it too. So we're gonna zone it like we mean it, and then we're gonna monetize it.
Maybe this isn't where it belongs, but like, what about water metering? That could be a way to at least start to track and measure water a little better. Maybe it's somewhere else in the report, but.
I think that's thoroughly addressed in the performance standards, but Sarah, we can go back there after we leave impact fees if we want to.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. I'm gonna say it one more time just to bring everybody back together on the amendment we're making, but essentially it's finding that balance between the macro strategy and not losing the intent of zone it like we mean it, but also trying to maintain some of the benefits out of the impact fees that are out there. So getting more out of current mitigation fees, that's how the current bullet reads at the top of page 54. Page 53, it sounds like for those of you who printed out early online. The bullet would be revised to get more out of current mitigation fees to prioritize those things we want to see more of, such as energy retrofits of existing housing stock, affordable housing, and incentivizing water efficiency. Just some very high level illustrative potentials.
That's okay.
Anyone that amendment, Bill?
That's okay. I like it.
Anyone opposed? Okay, moving on, thank you. And Sarah, I want to come back into performance standards on water. But Jessica, you had your start up.
Thanks. Two things. One is just as you all are making edits to the draft and going back to Tim's first comment, I would suggest that sections 3 through 6 could become an appendix. So that you really just like really quickly get to define the quality of life and go to the outcomes, but that's my suggestion. The other is a question, and Joe's brought this up a couple of times, and it's something that I'm not clear about after reading this. When we talk about the new floor area ratios, what happens when you have an existing PUD that already has established its own floor area? I see that in the section on slope reduction, we have special considerations on page 32. Special consideration will be given to existing slope reduction formulas within already established PUDs or subdivisions that incorporate large open spaces. And I didn't see something similar about existing PUDs that have established development rights, and I just wasn't sure if we had resolved that, if it needed to be in here or not, sort of question.
What page are we on?
So I'm on page 32, and there's language that fully support, that talks about special consideration for slope reduction formulas and already established PUDs. And my question is not about slope reduction, it's about floor area. And if I have a property in a PUD that has established a floor area, how am I treated once this moves forward? Do I get floor area that is part of my development order and being part of a PUD? Or am I subject to new requirements? Sort of the best advice question.
Good questions. I mean, again, right, we can go way down the rabbit hole, right? Is it a vested approval? Is it not vested anymore? You know, how does that? So I think, right, we need to come up with some, you don't want to lose track of that as something that needs to be considered when we go there. I'm not sure.
So maybe the recommendation could be consider how existing PUD approvals will be treated related to floor area.
Yeah, just so it's something we look at when we get there.
Can I make that as a motion?
So you're suggesting we revise that bullet?
It's added a new bullet. I was just saying this, we're talking about existing PUDs related to slope reduction. We're not doing that on floor area. And we're making a lot of changes on floor area, and
That's certainly kind of surprising we haven't come up with that yet. That's a huge.
we just brought it up a couple times. So.
And Jessica, I just want to make sure we're all clear on what the motion is. So page 32 under floor area ratio, a new bullet following the special consideration will be given to existing slope reduction formulas within already established PUDs. That would read as a new bullet, consider how existing PUD approvals, and then keep finishing my sentence.
Okay, consider how existing PUD approvals will be addressed related to floor area. In article statement, but.
No, that's great, very clear.
Yeah, it has come up a couple times.
Yeah.
So we have a motion on the table. Is there a second? I'll second. Max is seconded. So I will restate one more time on page 32, floor area ratio. The motion that has been seconded is adding a new bullet that would read, consider how existing PUD approvals will be addressed related to floor area. All in favor? You're gonna have this. And online, anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. 23-0. All right, moving on. Tim, did you have a new topic?
I kind of thought we were gonna go through the, page 28 to 54. Effectively, so I do have some notes, so I'll just start. I'm looking at a PDF, it's page 47. That might be 48 on the printed out, and the numbering work exactly corresponding. Under zoning overlay, there's an asterisk in the middle on the recommendation that says county could explore additional restrictions for 30 days or more. for rural and remote. This surprised me to see this here. I don't recall any conversation about. Essentially, we're talking about long-term rentals here. And I would like to just see this stricken. I don't recall any discussion about long-term rentals or recommendations.
Well, I'll offer to my recollection, I do think Randy brought up the 30-day as being kind of a workaround, ever, people just saying. We're gonna call it 30 days, you're gonna rent it for 30 days, I'm gonna recalibrate the price to give you a fair price for 5 days.
Yes, I do recall that.
Yeah, so I think it kind of came out of that, this was sort of like the 30+ day loophole problem. Is anyone else remembering?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to restrict long-term rentals. This is sort of giving a directive towards in that direction. Maybe there's a more clear way of addressing Randy's concern.
And if you go to so on appendix B, it's more clearly written, and maybe that's the language. It says, consider restricting rental of rural remote, not just 30 days, but also 60 to 90. And maybe the intent is to not limit long-term rentals, right? But to limit that intermediate rental.
Yeah.
So maybe that's just a clarification that needs to be added.
You say rural or remote or just rural?
Rural and remote, only rural and remote.
And so I think this is an important clarification that if I may offer a wording change to this one, that the county should explore closing loopholes for 30 days for rentals that are 30 days or more in rural and remote without restricting long-term rentals. Tim, does that more accurately convey the intent?
Yes.
And I can read it one more time for the good of the order. I'm in the zoning overlay section on page 47 or 48, depending on the version you've got. And it is the asterisk text underneath short-term rentals. The proposed revision would be that the county should explore closing loopholes for rentals of 30 days or more in the rural and remote district without restricting long-term rentals. It's good. Okay. Anyone opposed? And I think this is a great example of where clarity on some of the language is really important. So that's excellent. Thanks for bringing it up.
So I have another, I have page 31 in the PDF, and it's either 30 or 32. And it is floor area ratio component. And at the bottom, create a subgrade floor area bonus. Well, with that, I really apologize to the group if we took a vote the last second on this. So, I don't recall, did we take a vote?
We did.
2,000 versus 1,000.
We did take a vote on adding the subgrade floor area bonus. It was a motion that was brought forward and voted on as the 1,000. I have to go back and look at the minutes to see what debate was had about the number. And Michael, I don't know if you had any recollection of how we landed on the 1,000. I do know it was appropriated pretty thoroughly.
Yeah. Well, let me just, my notes are as follows. I'd like to see this change. The current exemption, which is almost unlimited subgrade, has been very effective in minimizing negative visual impact of house size mass. Out of sight, out of mind has worked very well. 1,000 square feet is too small for practical family-oriented purposes. Many of our homes are family and vacation homes housing multi-generations. I'd like to see 1,500 to 2,000. So 1,000 essentially allows 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and a family room. 1,500 to 2,000 allows 2 to 3 bedrooms in a family area. In my mind, it's much more realistic. I'm in favor of limiting basement area, definitely. But I just think that 1,000 is too small. think we voted on, I thought we had.
And we're not saying you can only have 1,000 square feet. You can only have a bonus of 1,000 square feet. You can have much bigger basement. It's just gonna be part of your bonus. Your.
Oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
can we make that a little more clear then? I thought we were limiting it to 2,000. Here, stop.
Just the bonus, so you can build your whole house.
And Tim, I think that's an important point out, something that's not clear again, that we should add some clarity around, anyone opposed to just adding some clarity on what the highlighted language means is that it does not mean that you are limited to any amount of subgrade floor area, but it just counts towards your floor area ratio or total cover.
But you just have to use TDRs to get it.
Oh, only the bonus would.
Only the bonus requires a TDR.
Right.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, good clarification. I want to do a time check with everyone, 6:12. This is the night to go through the material changes. I think we're getting to, that sounds like some more clarification changes that again can continue to be submitted to us until May 22nd. But I want to make sure that we address any additional material issues.
Hey, Blake, yeah, that clarification also would need, I think it would need to be put on page 42, or maybe it's 41 for the transferable development rights. Second bullet from the bottom, required TDR up to 1,000 square feet for subgrade floor area. Well, Blake, you want to go?
Sure.
No.
You guys can hear me?
Yeah, Blake, thank you.
Yeah, so there's been a top of my list, but it just seems like there's so many issues that I feel like we've never really discussed this, but on page 48 on the document I'm looking at in administrative policies, there's a section on pacing, establishing a max number of demolition remodels, as well as pacing the number of actual permits. And I do think that's kind of a concerning clause, one, because it is a long-winded process to get a building permit in the county. Not only that, I worry that if you maximize the amount of demolition permits, it can create like a speculative market on demos, same thing on entitlements. And I also think each permit that's issued is going to result in a more efficient, building that's meeting our goals. So I thought it was important to put that out because I don't think we've really discussed limiting permits for demo, remodels, and new permits.
Remind us what's the permit? If there even is a.
There isn't. And I would say, to Blake's point, it's a good point that you all should discuss, because this was in there before you instituted the tiering system. And so I think that a lot of what you've implemented in the tiering system probably is getting to what this bullet point was originally.
This is kind of outdated.
Yeah, so it's a good point, like, to bring up.
Blake, are you suggesting we strike these? I mean, what would your proposal be that we should?
I mean, I would motion to strike them personally.
And
To strike both those bullets, Blake, is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah.
Are you on this one?
Yeah, I have a note here. I am basically against limiting demolitions, because putting a limit on limiting demolitions per year, they will penalize long-term property owners. It'll create great uncertainty as what can be done with the property, and therefore its value, as demonstrated by the city's demolition permit limits enacted in summer 22. We are forcing the remodel of older homes that are functionally obsolete beyond their 30-year life. An idea I have is no restriction demo of homes 30 years or older that are categorized as beyond their useful life. What what makes 30 years? 30 years is the number insurance companies use. It's, I think it's sort of commonly accepted. It may be different, but whatever the.
But I guess I would argue, what about all the homes, or not all the homes that are built in the early 1900s or the 1800s? So maybe I'm stating something that's popular. That was really one of them all. Your point is.
My point is that what this says is we want to put a limit on the number of demolitions every year, but a number like the city has done.
Well,
And the city, the effect of the city's ordinance has been great uncertainty with long-term locals who own older homes. What's the value of it? If a prospective buyer doesn't know what they can do, if they're not in the queue for the demo permit, the property's not worth much to them. It creates great uncertainty and therefore less value to the property.
And I think simply put, like Kara said, I think there's a lot of other things in here that have already created, let's face it, right now we have built-in basement. Everything that we've done here is going to way put the problem. There's no need for basement. And if we think that maybe there will be at some point, maybe we could put some very loose language that says it could be looked at again in a certain amount of years to see if pacing should be considered. But the way I see this right now, I mean, look at this guy. Everything that's gonna happen gone through now to get a building permit, to get a demo permit, and go through this pacing is gonna be the least of our worries. So I would second what it is right this.
And I would just call out what Miles is highlighting, what was that line bullet, you all did with the tiering system, right?
Yeah.
And specified requirement for is permit review by says an impact. You expanded on that greatly, immensely, which is exactly what you're making that.
So should we potentially strike all that, in terms of death, right? And so.
Let's keep on the conversation.
I disagree with Tim about, but I appreciate and respect your perspective in terms of, realtor and looking at the value and the resale value. And I do agree with Max, there's so many things in here that are going to slow it down. But if you go back to the basic values that we were charged with climate change issues, demolition is a big impact on the environment. So no, I don't want to strike it.
Well, I agree. I do agree with that point. It's just that for the property owner who's owned for a long time, that's an older house, of which there have been in the 70s through the mid 90s now. It really puts an onus on that property.
I understand, I'm one of those, but I think climate's more important than
A financial burden.
Yeah.
Since Barb, just to put a finer point on it, with the tiered system and that highlighted text that we had there, that essentially is the tiered system. You feel the tiering system doesn't go far enough to address these
No,
specific.
I mean, there's a lot of, you have to maneuver this carefully, and there's a lot of things that will slow everything down.
And so, but you would oppose striking this text. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that the relationship between the tiering system and this text was something that everybody was clear on. And Max, to your point, one of the overarching recommendations in here is that looking at this thing in totality, it's going to require regular assessment and reevaluation. And that was one of the overarching recommendations that's in there as well. So there is a motion on the table that has been seconded, but Cliff, I want to let the conversation run its course before we vote.
Thank you. So if you had, let's say, for round numbers 10, you're allowing 10 demolitions. And you had 20 applications, wouldn't the second 10 be moved to the following year, which would take away their question as to when they can? That's not how the city operates now. It's, you have to reapply on January 1st. We're all in one in. And I know you're saying that's how the city is doing it. So perhaps the way to take the mystery out of when you have to be able to demo the place would be that if you're
not selected, not part of the first year's allotment, that you'd be part of the second year.
Just get in line.
Get in line with that, at least you know what year of, you can build, you can demo.
Essentially, that's kind of an engineering system, that's great, that's what you most, we all know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I foresee this, if it goes that way, if there's gonna be all those people, and maybe I will, maybe I won't. Everybody's gonna rush in, and, which makes it a very unfair process. I really believe that this pacing is not going to be a problem. And you have to rely on Blake, not just from knowing the positions that we're in right now, that there's already built-in pacing. And I'm telling you, this is pacing, that clears. This is our pacing, right?
And the tiering system specifically, I think what the intent of the tiering system is exactly what you described, you know, it does create that, you know, built-in pacing mechanism and, Nick, I'm gonna make sure you're.
Yeah, so, pacing aside, I think that limiting the, amount of remodels is not necessarily in the interest of, addressing private goals, because there would be underperforming, buildings that should be upgraded, should be remodeled. And with this, you're basically saying that you have to wait in line, and we're going through a super complicated process to get there, which I think is superseded by what we've created with the tiered model and language addressing what's a remodel with existing footprint, and that's kind of more related to if you have to use a TDR or not. But I think that there's a lot of stuff in here that's kind of baked in that this might conflict with and could be interpreted in a way that's counter to what I think this group is intending. And not only that, this might also cause a lot of pushback on this that might detract from the overall intent of this package and what we created since this was first put in here.
So clarifying, you would strike those two because you think it's within the system, like Max said?
Yeah, for pacing, I agree with that, but the side effect of trying to establish limits on remodels for pacing has a detrimental effect on allowing people to remodel their homes to become more efficient.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to bring it back to Blake's motion and the seconded by Max. So just to be clear, we're talking about the administrative policy section that bridges pages 48 and 49. And it's the second bullet on developing a system of prioritization. And the proposal would be to strike that main bullet and the first three sub bullets, leaving incentivize and prioritize permit review by house as an impact, which is essentially the tiering system that you all have developed. Blake, does that accurately convey your proposal?
Yes.
Can I just say one thing on that? In principle, I agree with Blake and Max that I don't think pacing the permit system is necessary. It's naturally very paced, so to speak. So, but I do think that we need to look carefully at the excessive demolition that people have been doing just to get their way with a new luxury home and replacing another. And maybe we can come up with something where they don't fall into the pacing or the max quota if they're willing to retain a certain amount of the structure and design around it to get their new home, right? Because I think it's been wasteful and quite frankly lazy on the owner and designer behalfs in that they just think it's easier to wipe a home and build a new one rather than to take a structure that has a lot of already embedded energy in it and resources and figure out a way to turn it into something that works for the new owner. So if we can come up with some sort of a middle ground there where we're charging designers and owners to use as many of the already embedded resources as possible to upgrade the home to their stylistic needs and meet the new performance standards, then they can avoid any sort of quota or pacing system and go right into the system. But I think what's been happening in the history has been dangerous in that people are just scratching homes to build new ones because it's just like a lot easier. Basically, it's just like, we don't have to really think about the foundation or the structure, just smash it and go again. Whereas we should be charging these professionals and these wealthy people with getting a little more creative with what they start with.
I think those are great comments, and hopefully they're well reflected in not only the tiering system, but a lot of the performance and the development standards and the entire section on redevelopment here. I think you're really stating really a great synopsis of hopefully what's in there and captured in the intent in the tiering system, in the performance standards, and also in the redevelopment section to really incentivize a good look at smart redevelopment that minimizes demos.
Yeah, agreed. Otherwise, I agree. The pacing system is already in place by default.
Yeah, excellent points. I want to bring it back to the motion. Do you want me to read it again, or is everybody clear on something?
Read it one more time.
Okay, wait, clarifying question.
Madison Blake. So when Michael and I lived on Seventh Street, there's two perfectly fine houses. They're probably only 10 years old, huge. They were torn down so they could put a mega mansion on that. That was just in the last couple of years. So can you tell me if this system we have in place now would prevent that wasteful demolition?
I don't know about necessarily saying no to it, but it's gonna make it much more difficult for that to happen.
So what about this bullet? I think this gets some of what we're talking about. Set a threshold for material waste in conjunction with landfill construction. Like that threshold is seen to sort of like, if you're tearing down too much and you're on the wrong side of that threshold, I think the indication if there's a threshold and you're on the wrong side of it, you can't do the thing that you want to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's for to say that, I mean, I'm sitting here shaking my head going, completely agree, is absolutely right. And then I could also think of a couple of times when I told people, you know what, we're getting to the point where this thing's so that if we don't start from scratch, we get 2x4 studs. Somehow we have to incorporate better insulation. The roof's not set up with 2x6s, you know, so it's hard to really just specify, here's that breaking point, and I don't know how to really do that, so I can see both parts of that, because I really agree with folks, for the most part, absolutely, most of these structures can just be designed slightly differently, and we can still keep that structure where it is. And you know, the other thing I haven't brought up in here is, for the landfill side of things, there's the new Green Halo system that is really trying to keep from overflowing the landfill and recycling. It's really, I'm grateful for it. It's really hard to maneuver, but it's got a really good way for this demolition side of things to make sure that you're reusing as much as possible, recycling as much as possible, and dumping as little as possible. It's a pretty complicated system that we're still working through, but it comes from a good place.
So shall we continue with the motion on the table?
Yeah. Could you restate the motion, please?
I would happily, and Kara's brought another bullet into play, but it's all part of the same motion. So taking us back to pages 48 and 49 on administrative policies, which you can also see on screen here, but it breaks 2 pages. So it would be deleting the bullet that starts on page 48, develop a system of prioritization to review building permits and all that follows, including the sub bullets up until the last sub bullet, incentivize and prioritize permit review by house size and impact. That's essentially your tiering system. So it'd be to strike everything else within that bullet. And addition for consistency would also mean on page 55 under redevelopment, striking the second bullet that reads demolition and redevelopment permits have an annual cap, because that's associated with it. So that would just be an administrative and clerical update. And it's located here actually on page 54. So that's the motion. Anyone unclear on the motion? All in favor? All opposed?
Can I change my vote? I was trying to vote like fourth, because I like what it said, but I'm gonna change it to no.
No,
To no.
okay,
And I like to say what I do.
okay. Let's keep the notes, that's 1, 2. And then no, okay, 3, 4, 5. Online, any opposed? Yeah, I got 16-5.
And vote to yes, 5 no votes where.
Okay. Anyone would you like to explain your
Yeah,
position?
I would vote for in favor of getting rid of all of them, except for actually the first bullet, because I think that the number of demolitions that we talked about, limiting the number of demolitions of the priority based on the age of the home. I think, to me, that's so, yeah, that's just the conversation we've had about demolitions and whether homes should be eliminated when they're still fairly young. I would vote yes with that kind of thing, so that's why I voted no. I would vote yes to get rid of the rest of the bullets, the other 3 bullets, but not that one. So anyway, that's why I voted no.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a great point to make a free vote, right? Because you changed my mind a bit there too. I'm curious who doesn't agree with that they're, to hear why.
Who does agree with them?
Would you repeat that one?
Yeah, so I would, the idea, I would like to see them be on the number of demolitions and priority based on the home. And it's to the point that Forrest was even making about like, how do we design around a home that's maybe only 7 years old or 10 years old? How do we keep that in place? Are there some ways of making it and reducing the number of demolitions that are taking place? Because it certainly feels like there have been a lot of them and a lot of new homes that have been raised and then something rebuilt. Fairly recently, when I lived in Aspen, just walking along the Rio Grande Trail, it's shocking. So anyway, that's why, but I support the other 3 bullets being.
So what is your exact suggestion, please?
I would leave in the bullet, or I would just say develop a system of prioritization, maybe to limit the number of demolitions and priority based on the need. And we could
Is that a
reword that.
proposal?
Yeah, I mean,
I'll second that.
yeah, so I just gotta like figure out what just happened and what we can do based on what just happened. Because we get to think about something, and then Mona has made a suggestion, explained her no way that I would go back and support keeping that one in, but because of the conversation, I'd just be curious to hear, like, are we missing something there? Like, the plate next to somebody, you were making the same point that's on board was that you see this happen a lot. Like, how do we get to the language we would need to not have that, you're tearing something down that shouldn't be torn down? Well,
That's what I'm saying, I think it's a hard breaking point, I think. I don't know, I mean, like I said, I agree with a lot of what Forrest said, but I think it's a hard breaking point, and I think this is. Just think it's gonna muddy the waters. We start making it more convoluted of what can and what can't, and still back to my original argument that. It's pretty paced already, I mean, I guess you're saying you walk around and not feeling that pacing. But I think everything that we're doing here is really gonna severely pace it.
Even around demolitions.
I think everything's gonna be paced.
Just like as like thought exercise, hypothetical, a 10-year-old worked with a good house and said, I don't care if it's really good, I want to tear it down. How does our proposal without a bullet like this limitation stop that?
I mean, so they just want to, what type of demolition remodel are you talking about? You're talking about straight?
Yes, great place, yeah. how would the system be in place?
So you're talking about straight, in square footage with the same footprint.
Based on our new recommendation.
Because that's what it would have to be.
Right.
And what size house, depending on the material we're trying to go into.
Yeah.
So, I mean, right there, we've already talked about this, is that, so we're already funneling all these different things. I'm worried that we're getting convoluted. And I'm worried it's already very convoluted. Part of what I'm worried about here is, part of what the pacing is because it's really difficult for the county and all their departments to read through all these different things, right? It's not just, oh, okay, this one's this and that. It has to go through every different, zoning planning, and they have to review it to see whether they need to send it to here, send it to here, right? And so then thinking of all these things when they review it is going to make it more. And so what we've done is we've put more ways for them to sort through all this review. And let's face it, we're not going to be hiring any more people, we're already very short staffed. And that's where I'm saying that this already comes in, it's already paced. I mean, honestly, some of what I'm saying here is protecting what I do for a living. I could try and separate that, but part of it is, but let's face it, a lot of this valley is based on construction. We don't want to kill that industry, although most of what we're doing in here is doing that, and I feel good about it. But trying to think of if this was built on top of that, all of this pacing, to even tell somebody whether they will be able to build a house and whether they'll be able to demo their house in them. I'm gonna go, I have no idea. Mary said, didn't you sit on that committee? And I said, it did, it's so convoluted that I don't know what.
Yeah. Here's I first used the term that, underlying, which was excessive demolition, which I think is a concept we all would agree we want to avoid. And I'm just exploring, understanding how that phenomenon is sort of likely to be lessened based on what we do.
And I think it will be, and let's face it, no matter what we do, there's gonna be holes and there's gonna be things that we don't love, but all of the strong language that we put in here for all the other things, I think I've said in the file. We feel like we need to vote again.
Well, I respect your knowledge and your experience, and so I just don't understand the process well enough to know that, will this process, if you have enough money, which people who scrape and rebuild usually do have a ton of money, will this be able to bypass, will they be able to take their house or keep it decent and scrape it and build again, or are there enough protections in this process?
Well, I was just gonna say, maybe I could just make a new motion that we can vote on.
Although there's one already passed.
And we're gonna have it in the program. Well,
Can I just have one concern about removing language? I like the bullet point that said demolition and redevelopment permits have an annual cap. I'm not saying what the cap is. But what I see that's going to happen in this valley is that there's gonna be this huge population of baby boomers who live in 2,000 to 3,000 square foot houses all over Brush Creek and stuff like that. When they move on, there is going to be so much pressure for redevelopment, and a lot of that's going to be happening in the tier 2. And I see our tiering system as streamlining that tier 1 and that tier 2. It's gonna be really difficult for you to get your TDRs and build big. But if you want to build to your allowable rights at 5750, which adds a lot of square footage to our built environment, and you have this whole population that's going to be shifting out and being replaced by second homeowners who want to redevelop. I mean, I just see it's not coming all that. It's not that far in the future, but
Careful.
20 years from now, 50 years from now. No, I think it's going to be a huge thing. And if you've ever been next to a full-on redevelopment, it's an interesting year or two to live through.
And I just want to call out, don't forget you all adopted the TDR program that incentivizes people to not build for their nuts, right? So the whole picture, the way it's all laying, there's gotta be some that grow, but remember, we've got a lot of different mechanisms They get deeded ground.
Yeah, and I just see all new homes, if you come in and buy a home that's 3,000 square feet, you're gonna wanna maximize your allowable. It's just it's what the trends showed in house size, that the average house size is now built in the last 10 years is 5,000 square feet. And so I think we'll have. I don't know.
Yeah, we're kind of forgetting the market that's changing right now as well. You guys that I've known forever, a lot of projects are getting pushed back, especially the high-end residential stuff. Yeah, we remember when COVID happened and all that, everybody wanted to move back here, remodel their homes, buy a house and tear it down, build a new one. That trend is kind of slowly on a downward slope, and projects are getting pushed back. You referenced Brush Creek, there's some other constraints in Brush Creek about how big a house can get, because some of those lots would never be building sites today. And water is a restriction there as well. But then what I'm thinking of pacing, and we're seeing it in the Mid Valley, is these pent up projects that were in the pipeline for 7, 8, 9, 10 years for the approval process are all of a sudden starting to build at the same time. And what we envisioned as a 20-year build out for some place like the tree farm is building out in 4 or 5 years instead. So that economy is going to slow. There's less development opportunity in the Mid Valley for new construction. But the other thing that we've been talking about is pacing of affordable housing. Is affordable housing going to be caught up in this pacing formula as it applies to redevelopment of Phillips Trail Park or Roaring Fork Home Park and things like that? I mean, those things are the things we want to encourage to happen and don't want them to be constrained. So the market is changing the complexion on single family high-end residential side, in my opinion. We've lost out of 14 or 15 projects between Meadowood and Brush Creek, 6 or 7 of them have stopped or are not going forward. And that'll come back. And the other issue about the landfill is guys will figure out how to get around the landfill. So, they'll haul up South Canyon, it's cheaper.
So are you working that we limit or not?
I think you need to do what Matt suggests. There's enough built-in control mechanisms here that people are willing to meet all the performance standards and show there's a community benefit and that their project makes sense. It should be on the table. If it's something that should get a quick no, it should get a quick no. The problem is we keep people in the process to give them a very long no. And in the process of doing that, we get whittled down to a nub or a pencil that's left. And, we end up giving up.
So we voted on something, and I think that, if you wanna make a motion that we rescind that vote and vote again, you may do that.
Thank you. I think I appreciate having the discussion, and I should have brought the point up beforehand, but I need to just let the votes.
Okay, unless someone else wants to move otherwise, then.
I don't want to encourage a material change, but when you're going through this process and presenting to the commission, make sure that someone comes in with a bona fide affordable housing project that doesn't get too caught up in the wheels of government.
Yeah, and I think the recommendation makes that pretty clear. And I know we've got one proxy already assigned, to John O. And Brian Hannigan has assigned his proxy to staff, and we already have his vote. So I do want to be mindful. I think Sierra has just had to go, but has assigned the proxy to you. And so any other material changes before we consider this package as a whole, given that we are over time?
Well, I hate to bring it up, but I think a bunch of people brought it up, and I don't think it has to be talked about now. But kind of going back to what Rick said, I mean, let's face it, this is a big packet, and this is what the BOCC looks at all the time, these big packets, right? This is one they're going to be really interested in, but they're going to be a plan. And I was playing around with what Jessica said. Would it be best to have, a table of content and stuff, the prologue, which is a great introduction, and then get right into the meat of it somehow, and secondarily to that, even before the meat of it, somehow, kind of like Mike was saying, summary of it. We need this to be as easy to decipher from them as possible, because they're going to be diverted And they need to look through this really quickly, see what they want. And then I think it's been phenomenally done. I love all the background info. And that should be there if they want to look at, if they get into one of these topics and want to go back into the next pages, look at the background of how we got there, or what the numbers are that support that. It's fantastic. And I say this, when I ran into Michael the other day, I said, I was just blown away by how amazing the guy this was. So I think it's semantics of how we present it. But right now, I think it's a bit overwhelming and a bit too much until you get to the real thing. I think it's got to jump up to personally.
And I think we've heard that statement. I go even 5 or 4 years at the very end of the meeting. I having helped develop this, I couldn't agree more. There's a lot there, and I think if we get there to this moment, that's more of a clarification. It's not going to make any material changes to your recommendation. It simply puts your recommendation where it should be at the head of the table.
You have an executive summary. We get it's all words, because none of the actual recommendations that we put together over the 10 months. It's a very general executive summary. All you have to do is put the statistics in 9,700 square feet.
And I'm not, I hope you understand, I don't think there's anything that should come out of that. I think having good information is pretty worthwhile. It's just how it's, how it's presented.
I think that's a really good point. I'm hearing a lot of unanimous consensus on it. Anyone opposed to appendicizing some of the earlier sections and really getting ready to recommendation for that?
I'm paring down some of the redundancy.
Rewrite things there. And again, you can, okay. And again, you can submit any clerical changes to us until May 22nd to on areas to eliminate redundancy, propose non-material changes to staff. But I think we are at the moment where we're ready to vote on this package as a whole. And what we're going to do, just as we've done with the table of recommendations, go around, give everybody a moment to not only state their position, but any background behind it. And before we dive into it, I don't want to get ahead of you if there's any preface you would like to do. I think now is a good moment. All right, well, thank you all for staying on. I'm going to bring up our folks on the screen, and Michael and Mona, would you like to begin? And Mona, as a reminder, you have Sierra's proxy, and Jono, you have Doug's proxy. We have Ryan Hammond's proxy.
I already have them.
Okay. Well, but for the good of the order.
Great. I would say let's start with that.
I vote yes. I think it's all right here. We talked a lot of granularity today. I think it's caught, I hope process moving forward gives more opportunity for us to continue to engage in different formats and whatever form that takes, I'm certainly interested. And I think that's where we're gonna really get into the action items and really have some codification, basis to it. But there's nothing in here that I think is missing what we've deliberated on. And I think it's going to be an excellent source of guidance for where things really land through a very arduous and involved process. But I hope we can all continue to help out and be part of that process as it unfolds. Yeah.
Yes, I'm on board with this, and second what Adam was saying, I'd like to be kept in a loop on how this is getting implemented, how it's being crafted. I'm very curious about that, because we all know that can potentially change that intent. And I don't know if there's a formalized method of how that's going to roll out, how this group's going to be notified, what type of day and when we might be able to do that. But I think that I'd be interested to understand what that is moving forward.
And Adam and Nick, I think that's been a theme, and just to address it, there will be a process as we've reviewed as this goes to the joint PNC and BOCC meeting on January 6th. There's sorry, June 6th, and there's going to be a series of public information opportunities as well. So there's going to be a full vetting process that we urge all committee members to stay involved with. Thank you, Martin.
So voting yes, and just a huge thank you to Michael and Mona and Miles and Mavis and Kara and Alex and everyone who Because without you guys, we would not be very far. So thank you.
You're here. This guy.
I'm a strong yes. I really have enjoyed serving at the committee with all of you. It's been such a fun experience slogging it out at some time, but just really appreciate the perspective that everyone's brought. I feel like this is a really strong recommendation. And good luck to everyone on your code amendment process as you move forward. Because that will be interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia.
Yes, for me as well, and for me, Adam has said just about everything I would say, and again, I commend the staff and the co-chairs. And everyone on the board, it has been quite an educational experience for me. I saw in the material, it said this is a master's level land use class, basically, that we took. And I can't wait to see everything. Well, not everything will be implemented. I think the DOCC is started in a certain direction already. Reading the papers of late, so I look forward to reading more. And thank you.
Lydia, thank you. Brent?
Solid, yes. Yeah, I've been following our process along the years here, and looking at the Northwest COG report and the Colorado Association's ECOM report that address mountain migration to the mountains, and kind of using that as a bar to measure our progress, and basically refit all the things that report brought to the table. And one of the closing statements here on this report is motivated to take action together. I think we've done a great job on that, collaborating on larger policy changes, hit that one out of the park, and exploring local and regional actions. So this isn't just about our area or Pickens County or the city or Boston. This is a far ranging impact on all the rural resort communities. So I think from a report card status, we've got a 4.0 or whatever you get these days on this effort, and I just encourage us to keep it going. Great job.
Thank you.
Yes, of course, again, and I just want to tell everyone it's been a pleasure working with you. I really enjoyed the process. Big thanks to Lauren, Michael, and to the staff for keeping us, in line and telling us that everything we need to know to make these decisions. It was awesome. It was a great learning experience. Really.
Yes, and thank you all. Appreciate working with you all. Yes, kudos to staff and Michael and Mona. Thank you so much. You guys have done a terrific job. And sentiment, I agree all around. This was a master's class in land planning. And I guess I'm eager to get the PhD. Thank you very much.
Doug and I both support it. We'll both be yes, and thanks to everybody. I hope this inspires other communities to make some changes too.
Thanks, John. Thanks.
I'm a yes. Of course, thanks to the staff and the chair, together were absolutely incredible. It was pretty amazing how much information we went through. By the next meeting was put back at us in a really real manner. That was incredible collaboration, incredibly great compromise on all parts, which is what a group like this needs to be about. And I think that when we look into the future and once this gets out to the public, I think this is going to be really bold on a lot of accounts. I think we've been sitting here and talking about it for 10 months. And I don't think we realize how big we are. We keep trying to go a little step further and step farther. And I hope I'm right that in months and years, we think that this is really bold steps to doing the right thing for the community. So thanks, everyone.
I'm in support. I particularly like what we've done with the TDR section. I think that's going to make a big difference. I don't support everything in here, but we've debated everything pretty thoroughly, I think, and I think it's time to move on. So, yes.
Thank you.
I'm a very strong yes, and very appreciative of the process, and especially of our co-chairs and the team, because you've done something, having worked in government, and I'm not a fan of meetings. So I'm kind of over them all, but I felt like that you synthesize the information in palatable ways that I could digest. And you, but I also particularly like the facilitation, because we had some pretty powerful disagreements, but amazing, we could have civil discourse. And that is a model for us, especially in our current society right now. So I appreciate the knowledge of everybody, whether we all agree or not. I think we came up with a very robust and thoughtful and long-ranging, so my thanks.
Thank you, Barb. And before we get to Michael and Mona, let's go to our virtual attendees, and I'm just gonna go in the order with which you appear on our screens here in the room. So that is gonna go to Glenn first and then Blake down back. Glenn, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm supportive. I'm a yes, and my compliments to everyone involved, and good job.
Glenn, thank you. Let's go to Blake with Bill on deck.
Yeah, I'm a yes as well. I do want to compliment the staff and the co-chairs and everyone. I thought it was a constructive process and appreciate everyone's hard work and enjoyed working with y'all.
I'm a yes as well too. It's I think really a bold and creative document. I think it's in the best long-term interest of Pitkin County. I think it'll be a standard set for other communities to follow. And it's really in the wonderful best sense of compromise. And I thank all the staff and the Miles' group and staff from the county, and you've just done a great job.
Bill, thank you. Christy with Jennifer on deck.
Hey, how can I say anything better than what everybody has said before? Ditto, ditto, ditto on the learning, on the appreciation to the staff. Sorry about the dog, but it was so cold outside, he had to come in. The learning, the staff, the two chairs, thank you so much. Totally agree with Joe and Barb saying, I don't think any of us are totally at comfort with every single recommendation, but we learned how to compromise. We listened to each other. And Barb, I loved what you said about, especially in this day and time. So thank you to everybody. Oh, and yes.
Christy, thank you. Jennifer.
Yes, I want to compliment the fact that you got 26 diverse opinions to consensus. That's pretty impressive.
Jennifer,
Well
thank
done.
you. We're not quite there yet. Forrest.
Consensus shush.
I just don't want to jinx this. Forrest.
Yes, I'm all in. Well done, team. I think this is a good step forward for Pitkin County, and everyone's done well to compromise and recognize much needed change. So thanks for everyone's time. Much appreciated.
Thank you. And Mona, as the proxy for Sierra as well, let's start with you.
Good, so yes, for Sierra, I think that I could only speak for her, just say that she supports this and would like to see it be bolder. That would, I would probably guess, because she said that part of the comment, let's add something about safety corridors for wildlife logging to under other recommendations. And I vote yes, I vote a strong yes too. I just want to say thank you to everybody since it started out. This has been an incredibly well done experience, process. I've learned so much from each of you. It's crazy. And yeah, thanks. And I appreciate being able to be a co-chair and working with this incredible team and Michael. So thank you. It's been fun.
Yes, and we just want to sort of echo what Barb said, and Christy, that this is a good sign for our community and people in general. That I think I've been so impressed by just the good faith nature that everyone has engaged with this process with. I didn't ever feel like anybody was sort of sneakily playing defense or overly aggressively pursuing an agenda. This was a very good faith, open-minded process, and don't let the colonists fool you. This is evidence that community is alive and well. So, and I appreciate your faith in us, and I hope we did you right by trying to keep things on the road here.
Thank you all. And just a couple of housekeeping. We had Ryan Hannigan's proxy delivered staff. He's a yes with strong support for any clerical corrections, updates going to staff by May 22nd. Got the month right this time. And then we also will follow up with Randy and with Chris, just to get their opinion on this package as well. So we do have a couple process and housekeeping.
But I think we can share that and we'll share with them at the end of the 26th that they're in strong support. So, but we will get that official count.
We will.
When will we see the final report?
Depends how many edits. We'll get it to you no later by the end of that week of the 22nd.
And is there a list of everybody's contact list? It's being circulated.
Christie circulated.
Yes.
Christie circulated one.
Yeah, yeah, you guys, I had to race so quickly on this trip. I forgot to scan it and send it to the staff team. And so they couldn't hand it out physically, but I will have the pleasure of emailing it to each and every one of you individually, because that's a legal thing. And any of you let me know via, text if you don't want to see anybody again or get their information. That was a joke. Okay, I will send it out to you guys.
And I know we talked more, but I just want to say on behalf of the county, the staff team, the board of county commissioners, you all are going to get a chance to be in front of them, but thank you. What you all have delivered is so different than staff could have ever come up with because of the different perspectives you all brought. You should know you have incredible co-chairs that fought for you and helped make what you got every meeting be the voice of your committee, and that you should all walk away knowing this is your package. So you have put an incredible amount of time. It was supposed to be 6 months. We knew it would be a little bit longer, so it was 10 months, but thank you. And I hope that I know that we will all continue in the process, but as well as to the best, please come on June 6th and let your voice be the voice to the OCC.
Karen, keep you talking. So really quick to wrap us up is June 6th, Kara mentioned, June and July, the BOCC is gonna review the recommendations. There's gonna be some public outreach happening in late June currently. And then there is a more complicated process that Kara can describe. much
I will
better.
check that out. We just had a lot of questions. We just wanted to give a little bit more clarity and walk through what we know so far. So you all drafted recommendations. So that's being presented to the BOCC and PNC in a joint meeting on June 6th. And really the intention of that is, this is your time to share your report. They're gonna ask questions. So our goal is to try and get it to them as far enough in advance so that you can come prepared with questions to all of you as well. From there, that really becomes a handoff to the BOCC, and the BOCC will continue. We'll look at those recommendations and start to formalize what they're going to put into a resolution as formally adopting this resolution. Formally adopting the recommendations. That will direct us as staff to really then move it forward into the actual legislative process. And to be determined on all of those pieces. At that point, that's really when we're going to dive in. I know there's been a lot of energy about how to get involved. What's the next step? That's going to be the next step. Once we get through with the BOCC, I think we're going to have a better idea of what's the phasing going to look like. What are the different work groups? How do we start to work it? And we will obviously stay in touch with all of you. And then just kind of the next piece is there's really 2 paths forward from the recommendations that you all have approved tonight. And One is the land use code, which is going to be approved by P and Z, and so there's two concurrent processes there. One is an update to the comprehensive master plan, which is P and Z has authority to approve. And then P and Z will review and recommend code amendments, and then those code amendments go to the board. So it's a very rigorous process, and the land use for code amendments, and the board will adopt those. That's for the land use code. For building code, any other administrative policies or elements there, it is really just go straight to the BOCC. And building code is through an ordinance process, but all of them will be through public hearings. So once we get to code with the board adopting the recommendations, we will obviously start to draft out what it looks like to those into full implementation, and we'll all be working together much more again. Any questions? I know it's super high level. So.
Quick one, is it a work session on June sixth?
It is a work session. Yep.
Then you'll send this to.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I don't know the process as a work session, what's up, we can come as members of the public. But, is someone going to be, are the chairs going to be speaking?
The chairs will be speaking, and would guess, and we can clarify that for all of you, the board would definitely invite any other members to be coming up and giving their reflections on the process or anything. It is not open to, I would say, public comment beyond committee members at that June 6th meeting. There will be obviously much more time for public comment throughout the rest of those.
Well, we hope that as many of you as are able will come to that June 6th meeting and participate in the discussion and present the recommendations that you make, right? Yeah. So, please.
Yeah, but they'll take committee comments.
Yeah, you will be considered not just a general member of the public, but one of the committee members they appointed to forward these recommendations.
When does the committee formally dissolve?
And we set it up to be a year, and it is formally resolved. I think it's actually at the end of June. I would need to double check, but I think we set it to be June 3rd.
And as always, we do have a space for public comment. There's no members of the public online tonight, and I believe our only other members of the media. So I'm gonna just adjourn us, but it is a well to go chairs.
I would say let's adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you all online, all right?
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks very much.